Hello everyone, welcome back to a brand new episode of Trash Talk. I'm here with a very, very special guest. Would you guys introduce yourself?
Hello everyone, what's up everybody? It's me, I'm Dwfan91 from youtube.com/Dwfan91 and I'm here on the channel. I'm so looking forward to this. This is going to be great fun.
Well, yeah, it's going to be great. And just to let you know, right, you're the fourth like Doctor Who type content creator been on the channel.
Let's go.
Yep, I had Darius on before, Confused Adipose, and a Channel Pup.
Love those
Um,
guys.
yeah,
They're
they're
awesome.
great. They're lovely, man. But it's lovely to like whoa! I need to confess my love. That was accidental. It's lovely to have you on the podcast. I wanted to have you on for a while. So glad it's finally happening, man. But usually with my podcast, I like to start right at the beginning, right? But for here, I don't want to start with content creation because I feel like content creation is like a bit preemptive in this case. Let's start with just Doctor Who in general, right? Because you are, as your name suggests, right, a Doctor Who fan.
I am.
Um, how did that start, man? Like, where was your Doctor Who journey? Like, how did you get into Doctor Who? When was that? Like, tell me about that, right? Because I always find this interesting with a Doctor Who fan.
Doctor Who is a very special show in that I
Mhm.
feel like every single person you'll speak to will have gotten on at a different point in time. I mean, I still find it
Yeah.
crazy how many times I go into the comment section and I see people say stuff like, my first Doctor was Peter Capaldi. And I'm like, what? Peter Capaldi? And then I
Yeah.
remember that was 10 years ago. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
perfectly realistic for that to be the case. I don't exactly remember what my first one was, but my first Doctor Who memory, keep in mind this probably wasn't my first ever episode, but my first memory was
Mhm.
watching The Invasion on VHS. I remember the specific scene that I watched first, which was there's a scene where the Doctor and Jamie, his companion, are getting tailed by, they don't know it's Unit, but it's Unit. And
Mhm.
they sit down and then they play cards as a distraction. That's my first ever memory of Doctor Who ever. And it was because my older brother was a Doctor Who fan before I was born. And so by the time I was born, I basically been watching it since then,
Yeah.
because he was watching it. And so I started watching it. And then it just kind of went from there.
Well,
In
no,
fact, I'd say he's a bigger fan
yeah,
than me, which is
yeah.
crazy.
Well, I always love when it starts with Classic Who, right? I'm a huge Classic
Mm.
Who fan. Like, I started with Classic Who myself with Tom Baker and John
Let's
Pertwee.
go.
So
That's a
massive, yeah. So I'm like a massive Classic Who fan. I'm staring at like an Invasion Cyberman head right now. Actually, I've got one like a replica.
guy's so
Um,
sick.
yeah, I love it. It's great. So I love Classic Who. I love that era. Unfortunately, it's a shame it doesn't do as well on YouTube. Otherwise, I'd make so many more Classic
Yeah.
Who videos. But it's an incredible like thing. But with New Who as well, because I know like a lot of your videos as well, apart from the Watcher video, which we'll definitely get into in a bit. A lot of your videos are around like newer Who. So when did that start? Like, did that start like pretty soon after like your first like experience with Doctor Who?
Uh, Actually, not really. New Who I kind of got into later. I watched a
Mhm.
lot of classic Doctor Who, VHSs, and then DVDs.
Yeah.
Um, I, it's one of those things where I don't really remember how. I watched them, and when you're a kid, the days all kind of blend together.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't really have anything else to do, so I just watched Doctor Who. And it's crazy because I remember Star Wars and stuff like Harry Potter and all of that, they came in later. And then, like, I actually go back and check, and that was like when I was 5 when I started
Yeah.
watching those. And Doctor Who preceded all of that. And I've got memories of watching Doctor Who when I was like 2 or 3. I remember at my grandparents' house, or my grandparents' old house, should I say, bless them. There was at like a breakfast table, there
Mhm.
was like one of those really shitty old TVs like in the corner, like a really small
Yeah.
one, and they had An Unearthly Child on VHS. So I remember
Oh
I must
wow.
have been like 2 or 3, right? Because this was their old house, right? And I remember watching that, and I'll be eating breakfast and I'd be watching Doctor Who, and it would just surround me and all of that. My grandparents, that was their only Doctor Who episode that they had, but still it kind of followed me there. They just happened to pick it up, right? You know what I mean? Like all of these
Yeah. Yeah.
weird things, it just surrounded me in my childhood, so much so that even though I probably wasn't like old when I started watching New Who, but it really does feel like there's a massive separation in time between watching all of Doctor Who, being introduced to all of Doctor Who,
Yeah.
looking at all this Doctor Who stuff, reading all these Doctor Who guidebooks, and then New Who. It feels like there was a real gap there, even though because I was younger, it was probably only 1 or 2 years.
See, that's interesting, right? Because I feel like for a lot of Doctor Who fans, and especially like hardcore Doctor Who fans, that like enjoy both like versions of the show, classic and New Who. I feel like usually it starts with New Who, right? They get into New Who, they watch all of New Who or like up to date, and then a couple of years later or whatever, they go back and try and watch like classic Who. Maybe struggle a little bit, but get through it. So it's nice to see like a difference there, like getting into classic Who, like watching a lot of it, and then even if it's like a couple of years later, like getting into New Who, right? I feel like you get a different understanding of the show, right? When you watch it from newer Who to classic Who, I feel like it's harder, right? It's harder because the character is completely different, right? Because you're going back into the progression.
And it's also it is a kind of a different show,
Yeah.
to the one you fall in love with. It's kind of like I don't know, it's kind of like watching Batman Begins and then going back to the 60s Batman show. Like you can definitely and you can love both, but there's just such a significant difference there.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I think with the new show, what I find crazy is I never watched it live until 2009. But I used to get the DVDs, and I didn't realize this, but I'd be getting the DVDs like 1 or 2 months after they'd aired. But because it was, child brain, I just assumed all these episodes have always been out. So I would get like, I remember The Next Doctor or whatever, I got that on DVD. That must have been like a month or 2 after it came out. But I was like, well, this episode's always existed, because I didn't remember when it didn't exist because I was a dumbass kid. You know what I mean? I didn't know what times episodes came out. Like I knew that Doctor Who 2005 started in 2005, but you know how it is when you're a kid. You can't really put 2 and 2 together and realize that they come out yearly or when they come out, or all of that. And I think that's kind of part of the reason why I fell in love with Doctor Who, because there's just this this mythos, this expanding thing, and you could put on an episode, and I think Doctor Who's more magical when you don't know where everything quite fits in. When you just catch an episode, it's a random episode, and you're just thrown into the thick of it and all of that. And I mean, maybe that's an unpopular opinion, but I've always found that to be why I wanted to find out more Doctor Who, read all of that, and got so obsessed with it.
Well, no, I think that's like perfectly reasonable. I mean, even just like when I like to rewatch episodes, I don't like to pick and choose, right? Because I end up missing loads of episodes, right? Good episodes, underrated ones that maybe I don't really specifically remember. I always whip up like a little spinny wheel, put the episodes in, spin it, and
so
watch.
That's the
whatever,
right way to do it. That's the perfect way.
I love that. Yeah, I love that feel of like almost like 10 years ago when you'd like switch over to like Gold or whatever TV channel, and there would be like a random episode of Doctor Who on there. So I love that feeling, and I completely get that. But my question would be next, right? Because we're talking about all these different eras of the show, right? Classic Who, New Who. What about like, I don't know what it's been called, like Disney Who, like whatever it's been called now, branded. Yeah. What's your thoughts on this new era? Because it definitely feels like almost. I know like Jodie's era felt completely different, but this feels like a completely different show at this point, right? It does feel very, very different to like you watch an episode from 2005, then watch an episode from 2024, right? It feels completely different. So what's your thoughts on like the new era and like this whole thing going forward?
Well, I can go really in depth onto this because I have been a massive nerd obsessing and researching over basically all of this, but specifically 2005 era of Doctor Who. I was really into just going through all of the box sets recently. Literally every single piece of content on all those box sets, I scraped them dry. So I watched the episodes, then I watched them with commentary, then I watched every special feature on every disc, and then I watched the confidentials, right? So I was like, for real obsessing over it. And I was noticing all of the stuff that made it all tick, and then trying to apply that to the new modern era. I think the episode which a bunch of people draw similarities to are Space Babies and End of the World, which I just watched End of the World and I just watched Space Babies. And outside of a few superficial moments, they're actually very, very different. And I know a lot of people point to the phone scene, but that's kind of just a thing that Russell T Davies does with all of his companions. So like Martha had a scene in 42 and Donna had a scene in The Poison Sky, so Ruby gets a scene in Space Babies. It isn't necessarily trying to redo that moment as opposed to kind of continue the trend. But what I really noticed was the very opening scene of Space Babies and the End of the World, which they both follow on directly from. So End of the World follows on directly from Rose,
Hmm.
and Space Babies follows on directly from Church and Ruby Road, and they both start with Ruby/Rose entering the TARDIS and then having this kind of explanation on how the TARDIS works. The difference in scenes is that in the End of the World, Christopher Eccleston just presses a button and then says, outside that door is blah, blah, blah. When in Space Babies, because they've got the money now, they actually go outside and see what that looks like, which I think cuts to the main point of this new era, which is that they do have the money to do things that they always wanted to do. What I find crazy looking back at the confidentials and looking back at the commentary tracks and all of that is how often they just complain about money, like all the time. In series 4, I was just listening to the Partners in Crime commentary yesterday. They were
Yeah.
saying, I hope that we can go back and do special editions of these and redo the special effects because, you know, I want this whole landscape to look different, and because we're in Wales, we're filming in London, they're going to fix that later, hopefully. Hopefully we'll be back in 10 years' time doing a commentary on how they've fixed all of these episodes. Oh, that effect shot is wrong, that effect shot is wrong, oh, I always wanted to do that. And so what it feels like to me with this new era is they're finally able to kind of do stuff that they want to do, and without being too critical, maybe they get a little distracted by that, you know. But at the same
Yeah.
time, I think it's still a good thing. I'm a fan of Series 14, even if I would say I'm critical of the decision to go with Disney, if that makes sense.
Oh no, definitely. Like for me personally, when it comes down to just like you mentioned, right, special effects and everything, I think it's great to see the show in such an updated way, especially because a lot of people now, right, if the special effects aren't like like Star Wars level crazy, right, a lot of people just
Mm.
switch off, right, which is unfortunate, but that's just like where we've got to just in media, right. So
Mm.
not only is it great to see that, it's also great to see things that we haven't really seen in the show before, just due to like a lack of budget. So that's great, and I agree with you with Disney. Is that maybe it's not the best way, especially like route to go down, especially with like BBC struggling a lot, especially with the whole TV license thing in a few years,
Mm.
right? So Disney probably wasn't the best if you wanted security. Hence all the panic at the moment on Twitter, which is great. Um,
I actually kind of missed all of that, but because it's the
you
same
lucky
conversation
bastard.
going on
Yeah,
every single time.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
just Rusty Davies says something, panic. Rusty Davies says something else, it's fine. Rusty Davies says something, panic,
Well, like,
etc., etc.
yeah, well, the Doctor Who community, especially on Twitter, like in general, right? Like, if you talk to someone like who's just a fan of the show, right, they're not gonna have this, right? But Doctor Who community have like a very like a almost downfall, like hopefulness for the show, right? They have this like nihilistic view of it that they want the show to fail almost, right? It very much seems like it, and there's a few Twitter
I
accounts
definitely
that
agree.
really spar this on, right? I'm not gonna name any names, right? But there's a few that definitely misconstrued a few things, right? To really push this narrative that the show's always on the brink of cancellation. When to me it didn't seem like that whatsoever. But besides the point.
I think I would be more inclined to be, cautious if they hadn't just proven with the 60th anniversary specials that they can do fine with that without Disney money. I
Yeah,
mean, I don't really see the problem. It to me, right? This is in contrast to the Doomer narrative. To me, it's like a win-win scenario. Disney stays, right? Then Series 3 comes out. I like Series 3. Then Series 4 comes out. I like that, right? Disney leaves. Well, then Disney have left. I didn't want Disney to be in the first place. So it's just like a win-win for me. I feel like it's impossible that they're going to stick around forever, which was my big concern, right? So either they stick around for a little while or they leave, and either way, I'm satisfied. So I don't really see the Doomer narrative. I think Doctor Who is a very resilient program. I think Russell T Davies, I really do love this guy, but every single comment he makes, right, is so easily misconstrued. It's like these journalists are running rings around him, just getting him to say the wrong thing so that they can slap it in their headline. Because
yeah,
if you read like his full quotes, it's very usually rather reasonable, but he always has to put in something in there which is intentionally, like eye-catching. I remember there was the
Yeah.
sonic screwdriver thing
Oh
where it's like it
yeah,
looks
yeah.
fun, right? And it was because of the way he said it that they were able to put it in the headlines. But if you actually listen to his point, it's something which I've been saying since the revival came back. Like in Day of the Doctor, of course, they do that joke. It's like, why are you pointing the sonic screwdriver like that? And I remember there have been discussions in the fandoms like, yeah, why is he using the sonic screwdriver like it's a gun? Like in Day of the Moon, the 11th Doctor's like shooting people with the sonic screwdriver, and it's like, how's he doing that, right? But the way he said it was able to be misconstrued and thrown up, and I can't blame anyone apart from Rusty Davies for saying that like that. He should be media trained. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
And
definitely.
he keeps
Yeah.
saying this stupid. I remember he said last year. He said, "What is it? The BBC is in dire straits." It's like, why are you saying that as like the head of a BBC show, right? Like, even if I agree with you that it's true, you shouldn't be saying it because of professionalism. He shouldn't be
Yeah.
saying stuff like, "I could leave tomorrow, but I choose not to." It's like you shouldn't be saying that, even if it's true, because of professionalism. We want
Well,
to
definitely, yeah.
know that you've got like a solid handle on the ship, right? I think another part, the difference in attitude between 2005, where he's like, if this fails, it's on me and my whole career's ruined and I'm done. Whereas in 2024, he's like, if this fails, well, I'm out and I'm fine. It's like, well,
Yeah.
you're going to be quite as motivated to do it then. And even if that is the case, you probably shouldn't scream it publicly because,
Yeah.
PR matters, man. PR does matter.
But like, it's almost like transparency is good, right? Transparency is great, and then there's too much transparency, right? There's being too open, especially when you're the head of like such a big show, right? Especially for the BBC and in the UK, right? Arguably one of the, if not the biggest show, right, in the UK. Like maybe don't go screaming like that.
Is I agree transparency is good, but I think he's too transparent in some ways, and then
Definitely, yeah.
blatantly in other ways, in ways that we all know he's lying because he said contradictory stuff all the time. I mean, I that panel where he was with the Alex Kurtzman guy from Star Trek, that panel is so funny because Alex Kurtzman is obviously much worse than Russell T Davies. The Alex Kurtzman, by the way, Rusty Davies said he's a fan of everything Alex Kurtzman worked on. If you look at Alex Kurtzman's writing credits, he wrote The Mummy starring Tom Cruise, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Let me pull this up because this is fucking hilarious, right? What is this guy that Rusty Davies says he's a fan of everything he's done? He did Cowboys and Aliens starring starring what's his face, James Bond. He did Transformers Revenge of the Fallen. This guy's track record is terrible, right? But then Rusty Davies has the gall to say, I've always loved Star Trek. That's complete bullshit. He's done like a million interviews in the past where he says he couldn't stand Star Trek, right? And now he's all buddy with this. It's like, who's he fooling, right? But either way, I find that funny. You know what I mean? Like occasionally,
No, yeah, definitely.
completely transparent too much and just give away and it's like, yeah, we're screwed, we're fucked, and we don't really give a shit. And then sometimes he'll just blatantly lie as if we don't know that he's lying. I don't know. I just find it so funny. I don't really know what's going on there. Surely the BBC should have like a kind of department that issues statements. You ought to like go through people before they issue statements. But I don't know.
Well, like I issue the blame. I don't issue the blame on the journalist, right? Because it's really easy to like misconstrue this word, right?
It's not
like,
the journalist's fault because that's
yeah,
their
exactly.
job, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. It's completely not their fault whatsoever, right? You can probably say I was a bit cheeky, right? But that is their job at the end of the day, right? My blame comes down to like majority Russell, but also a few of the bigger Doctor Who accounts right on Twitter, right, who actively read the post and misconstrued it, right? And like I'm not gonna throw any names under the bus, right?
I wouldn't recognize them anyway,
right? But there are a few, right? Especially some of the bigger ones, right? And I think it's pretty self-explanatory, right? Maybe who I'm going to talk about here, right? In the terms of, Disney's going to pull the plug. Disney's going to do that. For one, they don't have that power to pull the plug, right? You're framing it in such a malicious way, right? Which caused all the panic in the first place, right? This one tweet caused all this panic of like, oh, what Disney's going to cancel Doctor Who? Doctor's going to be cancelled. Oh, Doctor's not going to get season 3, right? And then of course you've got Russell, right?
Go on, sorry.
Oh well, then you've got Russell not being like completely like great with his wording, right, and being too transparent, which just led to this whole frenzy about Doctor Who being cancelled. And if you just read the thing, right, and don't listen to like the dumbasses on Twitter and like Russell's bad wording, it's very clear what Russell is trying to say, right? He literally says that the show isn't getting cancelled in like any way, shape, or form, right? And you'd be dumb to think so. So I mean, it's really obvious when you just read the thing.
Yeah, he said it was like the most resilient show on television, I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure. And
Yeah.
also, people are forgetting that next year there are going to be 13, 14, either 13 or 14 episodes of the Hooniverse in quotation marks coming out, which is the most that has ever come out since 2013. Right, like that's the most content we've ever gotten in one year, because in the Capaldi years it was 12, and
Mhm.
with Jodie Whittaker it was 10, right? And then with Flux, it went down, and then with this it went down again. Um, but there's the future has not really looked this bright in a very long time, I think, right? And even if Disney does leave, I still think that's kind of a win, because I wouldn't want them to stick around forever. You know what I mean? I
Well,
don't
yeah.
really mind if they come and go. Like, Disney kind of sucks. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
definitely, they definitely suck. Like, I think it's just great to give it like I guess the only positive of Disney, right, is to give it that boost internationally, right? Like really trying to like another great moment for Doctor Who to be able to let
That's
people know
true.
who maybe don't know about the show, right? To get that, and that's for me the biggest positive of Disney, right? Is that the amount of people that like Disney Plus will reach, and it's proven in the numbers, right, and proven how consistently Doctor Who was number one, right, on Disney Plus, like during the time it was being aired, at least, right?
We're
Um,
gonna
you know.
see that in like about 5, 6, or 10 years or so. There's gonna be a massive influx of people, and you're gonna ask them when was the first time you watched the show, and they're gonna say 2023, 2024.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, you're gonna see that.
I think that's great, right? And I think that's the best like plus of Disney. Of course, the money's great, right? Like making the show look absolutely incredible, right? But like I think that's the only plus for me, like with Disney, is that like that can do that where the BBC can't do that, where Russell really can't do that, right? Is where that's the only thing where it's like without the like Disney, like you can do that to a certain extent. Like that was really evident in Matt Smith's era, right? But like not as to like maybe an extent that Disney can, right? Because everyone's eyes is on Disney, right? This absolute conglomerate, right? Everyone's eyes on there, one of the biggest streaming platforms, if not the biggest, right? So I guess in that case, that's great, really pushing it forward. But the show has never like really had this bright of a future in a while, right? Even merchandise selling incredibly well. Like
Well, the merchandise is really good now. I don't know if you were
yeah,
looking at the action figures, but like, if
I've
you
got them
look at
next to
the
me.
well, the thing is, if you look at the Jodie Whittaker and the Peter Capaldi era, the
Yeah,
merch was fucking dog. It was terrible.
awful.
I mean, did we even get like a really good Peter Capaldi action figure? I don't think we did. I
I think there
mean,
was one, but it was like it was one of these like singular releases that was like really hard to get your hands on because it wasn't in B&M, so it wasn't easily accessible. Even that's a lot saying, right? Because B&M is not
yeah,
easily accessible, but it wasn't anywhere. But it was like one from The Witch is Familiar, right? During Series 9, right? This like ultimate Series 9 version,
I do
which
remember
was
that.
fine, and that was a great one. But there was no other one.
Yeah, and it all slowed down, and then with the Jodie Whittaker era, there were like very few. So now it's all kind of ramping up again. And I've seen a few people say, oh, they don't like the box design because it's too white or whatever. That is such a nitpick, you know what I mean? Like, at least we're
Yeah,
getting good stuff, good merch. And
exactly.
the show, I don't really understand how people are going to say that the show isn't, more popular now than it was, say, like 3 years ago. It's like, not even a contest, it's
Oh yeah,
so
no,
in
no
so
way.
much a better place, right? As someone who likes the Chibnall era, right, in around like 2020 or 2021 when Flux was coming out, the reputation of the show was like so low. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
it was dire.
And now it's like a lot higher, and you get people saying, oh, Empire of Death is the worst episode ever, and it's like, do we have like the memory span of a goldfish? You know what I mean? The same shit
Yeah,
every damn time.
but it's like it's what people say for every finale, right? Or like nearly every finale, right?
Basically
Apart
everything.
from yeah, it's like apart from maybe like Wild Enough in Time and stuff like that, the Doctor Falls, right? Where people like
I
I think
remember
it's
people
pretty
didn't
like
like.
universally yeah.
I remember people
Uh,
didn't like that one. They like World Enough in Time, but people didn't like the Doctor Fools.
yeah,
I remember
exactly.
that.
Which I think is a crime. I think this is a crime. I think they're both
I
incredible,
know,
but
it's crazy.
like that might be the fact that like I think Capaldi's my favorite Doctor, so that might be a bit of bias coming through. um, but
That's
I
an
think people are
amazing
really
episode, right? It's like an
it's great.
incredible episode.
Yeah, it's incredible, and I think people are being a bit, just a little bit, right. I don't really think there's a lot of criticism to be had that's valid, right, within, just even the 60th specials and Series One, right. Like there is for like everything, right, or season 14,
Yeah,
whatever you want
but
to call it,
some
right.
people have to reach really, really
Oh
hard,
my god,
to
yeah,
find like some of the bad in quotation. What I think happened, this is just a theory. Tell me if I'm wrong, right? The Chibnall era, people didn't like it, but not a lot of people really knew why they didn't like it. They just had a kind of bad vibe, right?
yeah,
And what is it? So what that did was it created demand for YouTube videos explaining why the era was bad, and a lot of
yeah,
these videos had like a bunch of kind of like cinema sins critiques that don't really explain why the episode is bad. So like for example, whether or not you like the episode Rosa, right? The criticism that people don't like it because it has close-ups is just crazy, right? Like if even if people didn't like it, that's not the reason why people didn't like it. But because that took up so much space in the conversation around the episode being bad, people like began to look further into problems in episodes. They became really good at finding problems in Doctor Who episodes. So now with a new era, right? People are being hypercritical in a way that they wouldn't have been
yeah.
if the Jodie Whittaker era didn't happen. If that makes sense, you know what I
Oh no,
mean?
definitely. Well, like people are being like heavily overcritical. It's insane.
I mean, what's a recent example? I can't really think because I'm not really on
Uh,
Twitter. So my
okay, here's
recent
one.
examples are Empire of Death, right?
Right, there is one I can give you, right.
Yeah, give it to me.
And then I'll let you continue, right. There's this one that I've seen. It's just to do right with like Joy to Wild trailer, right. And it's
Oh,
to do with the fact that there's a sci-fi city and there's a dinosaur, and apparently we've like just because we've done it in the show before, right? We've seen a dinosaur before and a science fiction city. We
I
can't do it
saw
again,
this.
and that's a massive flaw. And
The
it pissed me
dinosaur
off
apparently
so
looks
much.
worse. The
Yeah,
dinosaur looks so much worse than Deep Breath, and it just doesn't like at all. Like it just doesn't
yeah,
look worse at all, right?
yeah,
I mean, yeah, people are being really hypercritical of that. I don't think I saw the post about the city, but I definitely saw the one about the dinosaur where it's like,
yeah.
oh my god, this dinosaur looks so much worse than something 10 years ago. And it's like, bro, it just doesn't. Like, I'm sorry, I hate to be that guy, but it just does not look better, right? And even if it didn't look better, the dinosaur in Joy to the World is probably not going to be there that long, right? So, and it's in a different context to what it is. Are we just not allowed to have dinosaurs in the show anymore? Because they did it once.
Well, yeah.
It just makes no sense. And the sci-fi city. But what was the original sci-fi city? Because I know the one from the trailer, but what was the one they were saying has
Uh,
already been done before?
they were saying that it was like the fucking Beast Below one.
What the
Is
fuck?
like, yeah,
No,
like
it's not.
it's like you've done that once, right, with Britain, right, and now you've got a futuristic New Britain, right? You've already done it, but you can't do that again. It's like, well, it's a sci-fi show, right? Like, well,
You
I
know,
don't get it.
you know what that image reminded me of the new city? It reminded me of there was the Star Trek movie Star Trek Beyond, which has this kind
Yeah,
of like whole city planet, and it really reminded me of that. Never for a single second would I have thought the Beast Below. The Beast Below. That's like one or two shots at the very start of the episode that
yeah,
don't even like look good. Like the CGI's aged really badly, right? And it's also like one or two buildings. That the one in the new trailer is like an expansive cityscape. Am I right?
yeah.
Like it's
I,
a full thing, whereas Starship UK is a starship, right?
I,
Even then,
and
it's a
yeah,
totally new and different thing.
and even if they've done it before, it's like, well, it's a science fiction show. Of course, they're going to have a science fiction city at some point, right? Even if they've done it before, like what, like 60 years ago, right? Or like
I
10
know,
years ago, whatever.
14 years ago, they're not allowed to have another sci-fi city.
Yeah, yeah, not allowed. And I think that's what brings like of course there's criticisms and there's stuff that's inherently wrong with the episodes, right? There's always going to be, right, always going to be criticism, and I think that's completely fair, right? But I think it's brought this like whole kind of like vibe to every single episode of Doctor Who. That okay, Doctor Who's dying, Doctor Who's shit, Doctor Who's bad, this is awful,
Yeah. I mean,
which
remember
just wasn't
the
there before.
finale? It was what was the kid Morris Gibbons, right? People were like the memes were funny, where it's like, oh my god, Kate Stewart, child soldier and all that. That's like a funny meme. But like people were saying that as like an actual criticism, and it's like, oh my god, are we serious? Like, can we not just like take the episode at face value, like enjoy it? But people were saying, oh, the episode is morally wrong because it's got a child working at UNIT, and it's like, oh my days, just light up a
But
bit, people. You know what I
and
mean?
it's and it's the same fans, right? And like what I class like these type of fans as, all right, are like the super toxic 13 stands, right? Because I'm a 13 stan, right? I don't think 13's like as bad as everyone says, right? But it's the ones, right, that were like they'd be completely fine with that scene, right, where like the master and the doctor, right, they're on like the big tower, right? And like the
To be
master
fair,
like
I'm
is
from in that
disguised
scene
as
as well. To be fair,
I
right? I
but like it's the ones that defend that and then they go after like every
Yeah, I hate
every
the double
other
standard. I
slightly
do.
dodgy scene.
I mean, the thing is right, like, I hate the double stand when it comes to both, because I think the
Yeah.
13th Doctor's era, like, I remember with Arachnids in the UK, right? I personally think that the scene at the, I mean, as someone who likes Series 11, I think Arachnids in the UK is kind of a dumb episode and a bad episode. But
Yeah.
there's that scene at the end, the spider suffocates or whatever, and people were
Oh
saying,
yeah.
oh, that's morally bad or whatever, right? And sure, you can argue that, but you can't like say that the episode writer and characters are all morally bad, because then you would have to go back to all of like the previous Doctor Who episodes where that happened and then call them morally bad, like the fourth Doctor snapping that guy's neck or whatever, or just like shooting people or whatever. And we don't, because of course we don't. Even if there is like a moment where you kind of like roll your eyes or whatever, that doesn't make, when I say bad, I mean morally bad. Like, that doesn't make you morally repulsive because it did
Yeah.
something that you disagree with. I also hate this idea that if an episode isn't super leftist, then that means that it's like wrong and not fit for Doctor Who. I'm talking about Kablam here, by the way, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because people like say that like the episode is heinous, when in reality it's just not communist, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, the writer doesn't have to agree with you. He's not like a morally bad person because you have a slight disagreement. It's not even like highly problematic or whatever, but people go above and beyond. And then that for Kablam, and then people, because of that, now they want to do that with every episode. I don't know why, because they found it fun when they did it to Kablam. So now they do it to every episode, so they have to find reasons in every episode why, if you like it, you're morally bad, and why the person who wrote it is morally bad, or blah blah blah. And you saw this all the time with especially with Rogue or whatever, because we just had an episode in Dawn Bubble where they talked about racism, but in Rogue they don't talk about racism, which means the episode is morally bad. It's like, bro, no, it doesn't. That's not how that works. Just take out morality from the discussion at all, please. Just stop talking about it. I think that's the most toxic element of Doctor Who discourse, is when people act, and I got it a lot in my comments, which is why I talk about it a lot. Especially with the finale, I got it a lot in my comments where, because of random insert moment here, if you like this episode, or if you were the person who wrote this episode, you're a morally bad person. It just doesn't make sense to me. Even in episodes which I like kind of disagree with, I think the prime example is Kill the Moon. I'm not going to say Peter Harness is an objectively bad person. That makes no sense, right? He just wrote an episode of Doctor Who that I kind of disagree with. And even if you do kind of politically disagree with something that happened in an episode, that doesn't mean you can't like emotionally connect with it. You know what I mean? Like, there have been times in media where I politically disagree with the action a character takes, and I still find it incredibly emotionally compelling. I don't know if you've ever watched Attack on Titan. That's the first show that comes to mind. In Attack on Titan, there's a character who does things which I completely disagree with. No spoilers, right? But I still feel, the emotion of that character, even though I don't agree with it and the narrative wants me to agree with it. I still find the emotion there, and I still think it's good. You know what I mean?
Well, no, definitely. And I think within Doctor Who, right, I think nitpicking and like going down this route, right, I always think it's like probably the worst route you could possibly go down, right. But for me, it's always the really like outlandish examples, right? People go for they don't go for the ones staring you in the face, right? The ones that like the ones that maybe everyone could go, okay, maybe that's a bit, like I remember, I think it was the end of Praxis, right? I think it was Praxis or Orphan 55, right? Either one, right? They kind of blend in as like this is what happens to the planet type ones, where Jodie's doctor gives like this whole like
Right.
run off dialogue, about like the planet and about like looking after it and stuff, and like that's a scene where you go, this is inherently shit, right? Because it's like it isn't even just about the narrative, right? It's
But
the
even
fact they're telling us.
even if you agree with what they're saying, you know what I mean? Even if you didn't, but like switch that on its head, right? And it's something that you didn't agree with, but it was done in a good way, you could still recognize that it's good, right? You see what I mean? Like, talking that to another 13 episode, Rosa Parks, where a recent criticism I saw is that that episode isn't historically accurate because Rosa Parks wasn't just some random person. She like the whole thing was intentionally like rigorously planned. It wasn't a spur of the moment thing, and the episode portrays it as a spur of the moment thing that could have been altered. But even if that was true, okay, but they didn't want to do that for the story. So like you can just put that all aside. You know what I mean? Because it's irrelevant. Doctor Who doesn't need to be completely historically accurate, and even if that is what happened in real life, that isn't the story they wanted to tell. Even if you disagree with the idea politically that some random person who went back in time could have stopped it, which I mean, I feel like that's in and of itself is a nitpick, right? Because it's obviously not meant to be insulting, and you're reading insult into it where there's not meant to be. But whatever, right? Even if you disagree with that, I feel like most people can agree that that moment is powerful in the show. I mean, I found it powerful. You can go back to videos of the time, and there are people who say that it's powerful. And I mean, even if you disagree with that politically, and you're like, "Oh, that's not historically accurate," I mean, does that matter? Does that really matter to the story being told? I mean, maybe in the Doctor Who universe, that's how things are canon. You know what I mean?
Well, like I always view it as if they've done it in like a very compelling, in like a great way, right? Like they did it in Rosa, right? I have no issue with it. Like if they do it in a bad way, right? If they do it in a way, right, which is like telling the audience, right, not showing, right, telling the audience or doing something which is like, okay, this just makes it, not enjoyable to watch, doesn't make it compelling, doesn't like, hit the notes it's meant to, right? That's when you critique it, right? When it like does a really poor job at trying to convey something, right? So like conveying that, everyone's gonna like come together for the planet, right, type thing. It doesn't hit where it should be, right? But like if you showed that better, it would.
An example where that does hit, I think that one hits out of the park, at the end of Dawn Bubble.
Exactly.
That's so good.
Yeah.
And that's the opposite of Orphan 55. I think Orphan 55 in general, that's probably on the weaker end of 13 stories. And I think that ending sequence is so ham-fisted. And I think if you do compare it to the ending sequence of Rosa, which kind of takes a more transcendent approach where they go out to space and they see the Rosa Parks asteroid to show that even when, all of humanity is gone and all of that, because of course for the Doctor, time moves all in an instant, right? Rosa Parks will still be there because she's that historic as the asteroid. But with Orphan 55, it just... that bit where the Doctor says that, I mean, surely to the Doctor as a being who experiences all of time all at once, Orphan 55 should be as much Earth as Earth is. You know what I mean? Does that make sense to you? Yeah. Earth isn't their home planet. Realistically, they don't spend actually that much time in contemporary Earth, right? So if they spend about the same amount of time in contemporary Earth and Earth in the far future when it's destroyed, I mean, both are Earth, right? So to her, that speech doesn't make much sense because she's like, well, save the planet, but you can't because it's a fixed point in history that'll end up like this anyway, so you can't do shit. So there's so many parts of it that don't really work. Even if you take like the morality out of it, right? What I mean is you take the morality out of it, it doesn't work. You put the morality into it, that's when the argument gets so fussy because I'm sure you'll see people say online, although I haven't seen it, but I'm sure you'll see people saying like, if you don't like the ending of this episode, that means you're pro climate change or whatever, as if anyone's pro climate change, right? I think that's when the conversations in the fandom get so messy, is when the idea of morality comes into it, when if you like certain episodes, you're a bad person, if you dislike certain episodes, you're a bad person, and all of that shit. And that's just what I find so annoying about this kind of recent conversation with Doctor Who, is like, if you like Empire of Death, then you're a bad person morally. And it's like, come on, bro. Right? I can admit that it has problems, but holy shit. Anyway, that's my massive rant out of the way. I don't know if any of the audience at home will be able to interpret any of that. It might be completely illegible, but I had fun. So
no, I get it, man. And like, it is one of the major issues with like the Doctor Who community. For me as well, right? If I've like really liked an episode, right, or I really like a series of the show, I go on there and I see some like person that has absolutely changed shit, right, and like getting that nitpicky and going into it, right. It kind of sucks out all the enjoyment, right. And like I haven't always been on like this like side of like Doctor Who, right, or like I get to see all of this, right. And for people that like maybe don't see this, it must be great, right? But like it always sucks out all the enjoyment, all the fun, right? Because you have the people that overanalyze. Make sure that every nitpick, right, every little nitpick they want to vocalize is out there, which is great, right? Have your opinions or whatever. but I guess it kind of like takes the enjoyment of fun out of certain episodes, certain seasons, especially season one, right? Which I thoroughly enjoyed. There was definitely a few stinkers, like I didn't really like Space Babies, but that's just my opinion. If you did, great. But season one, like of this like brand new like type of like reboot, was kind of ruined for me because how many people came in with like this negative lens. And I think it's really unfortunate, and I think it's really unfortunate how like a lot of Doctor Who fans, mainly on Twitter, of course this were, perceive
There are a lot on
the
YouTube
show.
as well. I'll tell you that.
Oh yeah,
But
a lot in the
YouTube is
comments.
kind of my like primary platform, so I get a lot
Yeah,
of comments every day. And I do love the YouTube community. You guys know I love you, which is why I stay on here. But I mean, the amount of dumbass comments I get all the time, which gets so morally righteous. I have what's the word? Policy on my channel where I never delete any comment, but occasionally YouTube auto filters out certain words. So I go into this thing on my community tab. It's called Held for Review. I don't know if you know it. You're a YouTuber, right? You see some comments get auto moderated, and every time I go through there, like I just roll my eyes because it's always the most outrageous shit. And with a heavy heart, I've got to approve every comment because I never delete any comment on my thing, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Go on.
Oh well, like with my comments at least, like especially on the like Doctor Who channel, right? It's always one or two, right? It's always one that's like either like you said, like the comments you get, and then I always get comments as well, right? Which definitely you can tell that their political views from their comments when it comes down to their critiques of the show, right? So, about a woman doctor, about a black doctor, right? About, certain things going on that, like, the show ended with Peter Capaldi, right? You can really tell.
I do roll my
the
eyes
amount.
when I see that type of comment. I must
It's so
confess.
annoying, right? Because like in my head, right, I've always always had like a headcanon, right? If the show ended after Peter Capaldi, and that's not because I think Jodie's a bad doctor or I don't like Shooty, right? It's just always been like a headcanon, right, of something that like I thought about, right? It's like a what if type scenario. But these people, you can definitely tell. It's because they might hold certain views and whatever, and there are so many of them on YouTube. It's just insane.
I think on YouTube it is rather obvious. I mean, they think they're being so slick, you know what I mean? But it's like really obvious. I mean, I don't know if you remember, I won't call out the guy by name, but he released a YouTube video called The Gay Black Doctor Who Special Sucks. And it's like, how the hell are we going to take that any other way? You know what I mean? If someone tells you something, just listen. You know what I mean? Right? There's no point watching the video. I remember I made fun of that in a video. I got a bunch of, and by a bunch, I mean like 2 or 3. So I'm slightly exaggerating. But I got a few comments saying like, oh my God, but if you listen to the video, bro, I don't need to listen to the video. Okay? I already know. Right? And even if that guy did have a few good points, I don't really care because I've got my opinion. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think the thing about a lot of the politically motivated comments is that there's no point really listening to them because you can tell their main priority isn't Doctor Who, right? Like their main priority lies elsewhere. And if they weren't talking about Doctor Who, they'd just be using a different show to smokescreen for their political views. You know what I mean? So there's just no point really communicating with that. You want to talk about YouTube though now, all that, or do you want to keep going on about
No, definitely. Let's get more into the YouTube side, and then I've got a couple of questions, right? A few opinions on the show later on, right? But let's definitely get into the YouTube side. So we're going over Doctor Who, like Doctor Who opinions and stuff, like how you got into Doctor Who and stuff. But you started your content creation journey, man. How did that go for you? Like, how did you get into content creation and stuff?
Ironically, after dogging on the fandom, I've got to admit, I do love it. I do love the Doctor Who fandom, and I was feeling rather, is lonely the right word? Yeah, lonely is the right word. I wanted to talk to people about it. So I just made a YouTube channel and I just started uploading. And then I just kind of kept uploading. And then eventually just people started watching. I mean, I think I'm incredibly lucky that, what was it? It was like my 4th video ever, got 100,000 views. It was my 5th video. My 5th video, The Weeping Angels Explained, got 125,000 views, which is more than anything I ever expected. I was expecting 40 views per video. And then it all kind of just kept going up. And now I kind of feel like I've got what I wanted, which was a community to talk to. Because all I really wanted was to talk to people about the show that I love. And I found so many like-minded people, and I'm sure you're the same. You see the same profile picture show up in the comment section,
Oh
and you're
yeah.
like, "That's what I do it for," you know. Like I feel so happy when I see the same familiar faces commenting like, "Great video, man. Here's my opinion." My favorite series on my channel is this thing called the community reaction, where I do
Mhm.
like a poll and then I get everyone's response and I just read everyone's responses because that's what I made the channel for. That's like my favorite thing to do on YouTube.
No, definitely, man. And like, for me, of course, like Doctor Who wasn't like my first, like the Doctor Who channel, like Samuel Who wasn't my first project, right?
Oh, really?
I so yeah, so I'm a commentary YouTuber, right? So I've got this
I do
very
know that, but I
different
thought
view.
that channel was at the same time.
Yeah, so I started my main commentary channel maybe almost like a decade ago, 2016.
That's a W.
So
2016 was a
yeah,
great time for commentary.
great time, man. And like, always my focus was like, the commentary channel, like dealing with controversies, like the Malik stuff, and getting like my like foot in the door
I
with that and
remember
stuff.
that.
Yeah, and that was like a big situation for me, and like getting involved and stuff. So I had my podcast and had all these other like commentary related stuff. But I'd always been a big Doctor Who fan, and I'd always wanted to make content around Doctor Who. And it was probably maybe the end of last year, like before the 60th specials, I started making reviews on like certain episodes and like the 60th like specials. Before I got into like the niche that we're both kind of in, where we like
Mm.
take a look at a certain thing, right, and analyze it more in like a commentary video essay style. And that's why I got into it, is because it was very similar to like the content I produced on the commentary channel.
Mm.
And I got into that, and it's great, right? Because like Doctor Who's such a like a complicated show in terms of the fandom, right? And like actually like talking to a fan in real life or talking to somebody that enjoys the show as much as you do, right? Where on YouTube it's really easy to construct a community like that, especially if you do the right things. So seeing the same faces in the comments, commenting stuff, it's always great to see the opinions, like and what people think of the videos and what people think of fan theories and their thoughts on episodes and doctors. It's great, and that sense of community, right? Regardless of like my commentary stuff or whatever, you don't get that with other genres like that, because this is like an actual fandom, right? People are all
Mm.
fans of like the show, or like all people like from different eras or whatever of their favorite show. Will comment down below. And you just don't get that really with any other thing, right? In a show making content around TV and movies and stuff. And that's always a great feeling. Always a great feeling. Um, and it's fun. It's really fun. Of course, I've got like a different perspective of YouTube with commentary and other things, right, which maybe can be a little bit more stressful. Where the
Mm.
Doctor Who channel, for me at least, is really like light and easy. If I want to make a fun video, I'll go to the Doctor Who channel, make a video there. And it's great, man.
Yeah, I do think, building off what you said, it's a really good creative outlet,
Yeah.
I find, because you know how it is. Sometimes you don't really have a lot of time left in the week or month to do much. So you just work on a little video, a little passion project, which
Yeah.
is basically what my channel is. I mean, I'm not getting paid a lot, hiccup, off it because of all the copyright shenanigans, right?
Yeah.
Basically, every single one of my vids gets copyrighted. But I do it for the love of the game.
Oh yeah,
And
exactly.
I also just I love also finding other Doctor Who YouTube channels. I'm always commenting on everyone else's stuff, and they're always commenting back. I think I've like my YouTube algorithm is like perfectly in tune with this, because it shows me a bunch of stuff from people with like 9 subs or like 20 subs or that, and I'm always like the first one to comment saying, "Good job, man, great video," because like I knew how much that meant for me and still means
Yeah.
to me, right? So I always want to spread that love.
No, definitely, man. And like I remember you commented on one of like my earlier.
I remember that too.
Yeah, man, it was great, and of course, like for me, like of course for you, right? Like you got involved like in YouTube and stuff, because you wanted people to talk to you like of similar minds and stuff, right? Talking about one of your favorite shows, right? And never coming from like an analytical perspective. Maybe now, right? Like maybe you like you've got that now, right? Because you've seen analytics, you're starting to like know how
Kinda.
YouTube works,
I'm not
right?
very good at YouTube, I must confess. But like I try, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I try.
like you're more wary of it at least, right?
That's true.
Well, like I went into it, of course, with like like I want to do this as a passion project. I love the show and stuff. But I know how analytics work, unfortunately. I know what those 1 out of 10s mean and the 10 out of 10s mean.
Oh, that shit. Don't bring that up, man. I've got PTSD.
Yeah, I've always had that in the back of my
I see
head.
what you mean now when you mean wary. Yeah, I'm wary of that shit.
Yeah. So you know, I went into that like with that. So it was definitely great when like I found my niche kind of accidentally. You know, I made a video like when Doctor Who made the Daleks scary and something like that, right? Like my first video, right? And it was just a passion project, right? Because I hadn't really seen anyone talk about it before. I spoke about that. Spoke about like the interconnecting story there. And you know, the rest of history with that channel. But I went, you know, into it with like a very different perspective. And it's always great talking to other like Doctor Who channels that you know had that different perspective, right? Had like different perspective of why they went in it, and you know, learning about why they did it. Because you know, with a lot of the biggest Doctor Who channels, the most popular ones, or the one with like a you know a fandom, no one goes in there for views or money, right? Like I got the channel monetized, but I really couldn't care less about that.
Yeah,
For
I
one,
mean,
copyright,
it's just not
you
gonna
know,
happen. Like, it's
yeah,
just not realistic.
yeah, not whatsoever. And you know, it's not worth it for me. Like I do the channel still, and like you know, upload consistently on there because I love Doctor Who and I love making that content. I love getting my opinions out there, having some fun, doing some fan theories and other stuff. And that's because I love it, not because of an analytical perspective. Where you know, maybe for me at least, with like certain commentary videos, maybe I'm doing it, you know, more out of an analytical perspective, trying to like you know keep my channel going. Well, with the Doctor Who stuff, you don't have that, right? And I'm sure you're the same, right? Where you make a video because you want to make that video. You don't do it because of analytics.
Nah, and there's not really much point for me to anyway, because
Yeah.
the way I make videos, so it is a mixture of I want to make it, but also I don't really make it unless I think other people wouldn't care. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Or I mean, so there are videos which I make solely for me,
Mhm.
basically. Um, I can't really think of any off the top of my head, but I know that I've done at least one or two, especially early on. But now when I think of like video, this is a clear example. A few months ago, I made a video on the Trickster, and
Yeah.
I remember that video because it was between making a video on the Trickster or making a video on Sutek, and this was before the finale came out, so we didn't know Sutek was going to be in it, but I thought he was going to be in it, and I
Mhm.
could have made that video, but I did the Trickster because I thought more people would care about the Trickster, and I was right because that video ended up doing very well.
Yeah.
And then later on, I made a video on Sutek, and that video did really well as well, actually, too. But it was after the finale came out, so you
Mhm.
know there's a difference there.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and with a bunch of videos which I'm working on now, a lot of them are based around what I want to do. My video about the flood, which I released rather a long time ago now, that was made because I wanted to do another one of those unsolved mystery videos, which I find so fun, but also because I wanted to do a topic which I knew other people would like, and people did like it. So
Yeah, and I guess with that, it's always a gamble as well, right? With what Doctor Who fans will engage with, what they want to see.
mm,
Because I guess with my perspective of like YouTube and stuff, with commentary and other stuff, it's fairly easy. Right? If you do a trending topic or you do like a documentary on something, right? Like you know, it's fairly easy to gauge what the audience wants from that.
yeah.
But with Doctor Who, it's really not easy to gauge what the audience wants to see, what they're more interested in, and you have to kind of go off not only your own gut and what you want to make, but also what videos have done well in the past, and you know, kind of rework it from there. And at least that's what I've tried to do with the channel because it's
I
like a
feel like
completely
my
different
gut
creation.
is wrong like almost all the time. I'm being
Yeah,
honest. Like
yeah.
the videos which I never expect to pop off are always the ones that go crazy. Like that Weeping Angel video that I mentioned earlier. I thought that one was gonna do nothing, and then it went fucking crazy.
You
And
know,
then there
yeah.
was like other ones where I'm like, yeah, man, this is gonna go crazy, and it just did all right. I mean, luckily none of my videos have ever crashed and burned. Um, yeah, none of them have ever done that. But I'm tempting fate because my next one is going to now. But
Yeah.
I definitely kind of am not fully in tune, and the best I can do is really guess. I mean, when I did that video on 73 yards, I knew that one was gonna go crazy, and that was actually the most subscribers I ever gained in a day. That was 2.1 thousand subscribers off one video because I left it on a cliffhanger, and I knew that video was gonna
That's
do well.
insane.
But outside of that, I kind of actually I knew my brief explanation of Doc 2 was going to do well as well. I knew because for a while that was my least popular video on my channel, but I knew that because it's long, it would eventually accumulate more views
Yeah.
than it did, right? And I think you kind of have to trust the process there, because I know that if I was a fan or just like a typical YouTube audience goer, if I saw that video, I would want to watch it. So I know that it's going to do well kind of just because of that. Whereas I think the main important part is you've got to watch a lot of YouTube to know what people on YouTube want. But even then, as you say, it's a complete gamble. Like I get it
Yeah.
wrong way more than I get it right.
Yeah, I had that very recently. I made a video on like the Reapers, right? I thought, okay, great. I do a series like on my channel called like "What Happened to," right? So like I did one
Yeah.
like "What Happened to the Cyber Sidemen," and that did great. Like "What Happened to Dalek Khan," "What Happened to whatever else," right? I love doing this series. It's great, right? Great for me, right? I get to like give some fan theories, maybe read some expanded media, right? What happens to Madden Bavarian, right? The stuff that I know people will care about. I was like, okay, the Reapers, right? What happens to the Reapers? It's a question everyone asks. The video did fucking awfully, right?
Oh,
Lowest view
I
video
know the
ever,
feeling, man.
right?
You hate to see it, and it just
Yeah,
happens. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
and there was no way to predict that or whatever, because it's so unpredictable. YouTube, right? It's like a gamble based off of your interpretation and your evidence that you can find, right? But
I remember when
sometimes it
Rogue
just
went
doesn't
out
work.
and my review from Rogue, I legit, it was like every video I'd done was a one out of 10. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So I did like review of the first two episodes, 1 out of 10, review of Boom, 1 out of 10, 73 yards video, 1 out of 10, second 73 yards video, 1 out of 10, third 73 yards video, 1 out of 10. And then, right, Rogue, and it's like 9 out of 10. It's like, oh my God.
yeah,
People do not care about this fucking episode, do they? Right? And it's like, when you're a victim of the niche, you know what I mean?
yeah.
And sometimes I feel like not uploading is the best thing to do, which is why I haven't been uploading recently. I have been working on videos, but I haven't been uploading because I'm working on the video to upload at the right time. You know what I mean?
Oh no, definitely, yeah. Um, I unfortunately, a few months ago, I took a break after like a Sea Devils video, right? Because I was like, okay, I'm gonna make like this was one of my only other flops, right? Thankfully, right, might tempt fate here. All the other ones have like done fairly well for the channel size, right? Like
Yeah,
2,000 views onwards, right? Great, right? Anything above a thousand, I really
that's
don't
really
care.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
exactly. Just anything like that, I'm happy with. Right? But I made a video on the Sea Devils, or like the show. It didn't do so well, like 500 views. Still happy with it. Whatever. I made a video on something that I cared about. We're all good. Um, but I took a break and I was getting ready to come back. And then some stuff happened where basically I got logged out of the account for like 2 months. So I was gone like on the channel for like 3 and a bit months. And
Damn.
when I came back, views were like back to normal. They were even better than before. And taking a break can sometimes be incredible for the algorithm, great for motivation. Work on videos, you can then release them at the right time.
That's
Reformulate what
facts.
you want to do.
Yeah,
Um,
that's definitely facts. I mean, I think taking a break is really underrated, actually. But you just have
yeah,
to kind of take them at the right time. Like, if I took my break when the new series was airing, for example, and that would be kind of dumb.
yeah,
But
exactly. Yeah,
now, because the new episode's gonna come out, right? I'm about to come back. This is a good time to come back. And take the few months off where there wasn't any news and nothing was coming out. Like, what would I even talk about in my videos? Just begging for a new trailer? Is that all I do? Right? You know what I mean?
well, yeah,
So I think taking a if I didn't do this break, my videos that I would have uploaded would be a reaction to the new trailer, which I've already done a reaction to a trailer, and that's it. So like, what would be the point? And it was just, I do think taking a break is really great for doing YouTube, and also I do think not really focusing so much on the views. I mean, of course you've got to, because you've got to gauge what your audience likes. Because if you just
yeah,
keep pumping out videos which no one likes, like what's the point? I mean,
yeah,
sure you do a few for yourself, but like, who are you making anything for? And I do
yeah.
think my videos are made for people to enjoy, right? And so if a video does do poorly, A, that's on me, but B, I've got to learn from that to do better. You know what I mean?
Oh,
And
definitely. Yeah,
I think the topic is like the main point, because when people, I feel like I can say this is definitely the case for you, but I can only say I feel like this is the case for me. When you watch the video, like you've clicked on it, you're going to enjoy it. But the
yeah,
big thing is like clicking on it in the first place, right?
yeah. like and that's something that I've really battled with thumbnails recently, right, with the Doctor Who channel, because before, like, of course, like, again, I go back to commentary, right, but I'm grounded in commentary, so like, the niche's
Yeah.
thumbnails right now is text thumbnails, right? Text thumbnails do great, so you want to do that. And then it's gauging with what Doctor Who fans want, and for ages I did like no text, right? It was more maybe maybe more of like an artistic, like cinematic type thumbnail, where the topic of like, or the main character of the topic that I'm talking about would be in the thumbnail, and then there would be two things that relate to either side, right? And that worked, and then I wanted to switch over with text, right? And it's trying to gauge, right, what a Doctor Who fan, right, who doesn't really give a shit, right, and just wants to watch this video would rather click on, right? Like these type of thumbnails, right? And that's something, again, maybe it's like a Doctor Who fan who uploads content, right? A lot of people, maybe don't think about, right? I don't think like the wider like Doctor Who like community that uploads videos really think about that, maybe, like apart from like maybe more of the content essay type ones like Harbour Homes and other ones like that, where they don't think about the thumbnails. But like, maybe it's just because I come from this commentary background, but I'm always thinking about the thumbnails, right? The text is good, if like, if this thumbnail should go with and whatever, and that's like really probably the most stressful part of that process, right? Because it's easy to make the video, right? Because Doctor Who, big fan,
Yeah.
easy, right? But then from like an analytical perspective, of course, you want it to do like somewhat decently to a point where people actually care. You're engaging with people that like want to chat to you about Doctor Who, or like want to like express their opinions about it. So the thumbnail is arguably the most important part. And again, with a niche like Doctor Who, that makes it ever harder trying to gauge that analytically, which is the only really big challenge I've ever faced within like this kind of niche, is that there's no guidebook, there's no other proper examples to go off of.
I think something to keep in mind, this is something which I've always kept in mind, is that because Doctor Who is a niche, the audience of viewers, so for commentary, I don't really know, but I assume that commentary is a much wider kind of wider audience,
Yeah,
which means it's more difficult to pierce into, right? Which I think the positive of being in Doctor Who is it's very easy to kind of pierce into the community because not many people are making videos. But on the opposite side, not many people are actually watching videos. I would imagine there's a dedicated audience of about 20,000 people for Doctor Who content who like are Doctor Who fans who use YouTube regularly. I would say there are about 20,000 at least in my orbit, if that makes sense.
Whereas, definitely, yeah.
And occasionally you'll see videos that go way out of that, but if you look at those videos, the majority of the audience aren't actually Doctor Who fans. So if your video gets, say, well, my average views are about 5,000 per video, I would say. So if my video gets 5,000, that's like a quarter of the whole audience. So it's like really impressive. And if you get 1,000 views, which sometimes my videos get 1,000 views, right, that's like 1/20th of the audience. And it's very easy to get kind of dismayed and be like, oh, the numbers are so low. And I don't think anyone is immune to this, right? I think literally every single person in the whole world is like this, right? But at the same time with Doctor Who, it's a lot more difficult to get those views because there are a lot less people. So again, when it time back to taking a break, the reason why I think taking a break is actually so good and so important is because sometimes, I said 20,000, sometimes that number goes down to like 10 or 5,000. And when there's only like 5,000 people who like Doctor Who content online on YouTube, then you're probably only going to get about like 200 views on the video, probably. And in that downtime in series, so like February or March or something like that, or like October or something like that, like those months where Doctor Who fans aren't really going to be online, then I think it's good to just take a break because your audience isn't there, so you just be shooting out into the void. You know what I mean?
No, exactly. And like you said, of course, with commentary, it's such a big genre, right? Arguably one of the biggest on YouTube, right? Aside from gaming, right? So there are always going to be like, it's very different, right? But of course, as like a main commentary YouTuber, in terms of like, that's my main thing. I always go into like Doctor Who content creation with that head. So sometimes that's like good, sometimes that's bad. Like it's got his pluses and like his downsides. But no, you're right. Of course, like it's definitely a smaller niche. There are less people watching than there are with other niches, just even other genres of content, other conglomerates like Marvel and other stuff, right? Like way less people watching Dot 2 content than that. But it is easier to pierce into that like genre and that niche of content, which is great, right? Because it means that realistically, right, within reason, of course, if you're making like half decent content, any Dog 2 fan that has access to like any like editing software or a phone or whatever can make this content, can express their opinions, can do a bit of easy editing, and get this like little fandom going. Which I think is like the massive pro of the Doctor Who community is you don't really need all the fancy editing, right? You kind of throw some clips, maybe a few screenshots, do a little bit of editing, background music or whatever you want to do. Do like a nice thumbnail and title, and you're pretty much there. Like people come for your opinions, they don't come for the editing. Which in other genres has definitely become like a big thing of like I'm here because the editing's great or this is good, whatever. Where we talk to it's if you've got an interesting opinion or you've got an interesting theory or a view or whatever, people are interested, right? Which I love that. I think it's great. I think it's really unique to the Doctor Who community as well, because even like bigger niches like Marvel and other stuff isn't exactly like that, because it is like a bigger niche where people within the Doctor Who community just want to hear other opinions from other Doctor Who content creators and other Doctor Who fans, which makes it such an enjoyable community to upload in.
Yeah, I completely agree with basically every single thing that you said. I mean, I think the Doctor Who on YouTube, the reason why I find it so fun is because there are people who will be there no matter what. Even if my vids, when they did only get 40 views, there were people there who were kind of commenting on every single one. And I think when you kind of get more into the thousands instead of just like the tens, you can kind of lose that more intimate personal thing and start thinking about it from an analytical point of view.
Oh, definitely.
But like I don't really want to. I think part of the reason why I still do enjoy my channel is because I have not yet fully been absorbed by focusing on the numbers. I mean, some are going to go crazy, some are going to go completely terrible. But at the end of the day, my opinion is out there, and it's kind of just an archive of my work is what I see it as.
Yeah,
and I also
exactly
enjoy working on each process of making the video. So I enjoy writing the video, I enjoy editing the video, I enjoy uploading the video. And I remember I got a comment, this was a long time ago, but it was a comment who said that all I do is go with the wind. And he said, I'm by basing it off other people's feedback. And initially, when you read a negative comment, your instinctive reaction is to be defensive and say, what? No. But then I like actually listened to it. And even though he meant it as an insult, I was like, yeah, I do. I have. And then I look back on my old videos from just a year ago. I mean, I haven't actually been making videos that long, but I've improved so much, right? Like, not just how I'm saying, but like everything, like the audio, how I edit, the length of videos, like everything has gone up. And I think, you know what, I really am grateful and happy to do this. And if I'm getting this much better in 1 year, how am I going to be next year? And I think that's the passion for me, is that it is kind of a game, and I love the game. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And I think that's what's great as well about doing it around something like this, because it is a huge passion project, right? Especially for me, at least. Like, this is a huge passion project. Something that, when commentary stressing me out, or, all these other projects I've got going that are to do with commentary, right? Doctor Who's like a massive escape, not only for content creation, of course, but also just personally as well. So it's always great to come to the Doctor Who channel, do something that is just easy for me, less stressful, enjoying it. Is this passion project, and I can do it really easily, which is such a big separation from the commentary content that I create, and it's great. I think that's what's great about Doctor Who YouTube, is that you can do that. You slowly improve, you work on things, you make content for yourself, for the audience, whatever you want to do, and it doesn't really matter. There's no really stress on it. Of course, you don't want the videos to do bad, right? I don't think anyone ever wants their videos to do bad. There's no pressure on it, always doing like, 1 out of 10, 2 out of 10, right? And that's what I really like about the Doctor Who community, is for me at least, there's no like big pressure on that. And you can kind of do whatever you want within reason, and there's a lot of wiggle room there to have fun, to throw out all these ideas out there. And that's where like I want to ask like this one like final question in terms of your channel before like I get onto just like 2 questions to end it off.
Okay.
And that's why your watcher video, right? Because this is a classic Who video which just blew up, right? especially about like the Watcher, right? Which I don't know, like a maybe general even Doctor Who audience maybe might not even really know about that, right? Because I feel like the general Doctor Who audience, a lot of it, especially on YouTube and stuff, I feel like maybe 70% of it is like a lot of like new Who fans, right? So what was your experience behind making that video and like the audience reaction to that?
So this video, there was more strategy going into it than meets the eye. I'm gonna pull up my channel and I'm gonna go
Mhm.
oldest, so I remember the exact timeline of what videos I uploaded. Let me get, yep. So this video, when it first went out, was my worst by far. It was a 10 out of 10, and it had 90 views for the longest time. But then
Mhm.
it quickly got picked up by the non-Doctor Who audience. Every single one of my big videos has been big because of people who don't watch Doctor Who. So for my What is the Flood video, ironically, it was Halo fans who made it go completely crazy, made it blow up.
Yeah.
Because the flood is also a thing in Halo, even though it's different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was kind of aware of that going in because, of course, I've played Halo, but whatever. I'm talking about the Watcher video.
Mhm.
Back when I was first dying, what I realized is that horror gets a lot of views on YouTube. And my
Yeah.
first videos to actually do well weren't even about Doctor Who. They're about this game called Five Nights at Freddy's, which I've
Mhm.
always loved this franchise. I think it is so cool and freaky and funny. And although I haven't really kind of kept up with the newer games, I thought that's why when I made this channel, it would be a perfect example for me to kind of get back into it. And since then, even though you wouldn't know about this because it's not on my channel, I've done like a few collabs with other YouTubers in that
Mhm.
niche that weren't even Doctor Who. In fact, my first ever collabs weren't even Doctor Who. But what happened is because of the algorithm, it showed a bunch of Five Nights at Freddy's fans my video. Then, right after I uploaded a video about this thing called The Watcher, it meant that a bunch of Five Nights at Freddy's fans got recommended this video. And they didn't know that it was Doctor Who, even though the title says it, but they just saw the image. The imagery is so evocative. And I didn't know
Mhm.
this at the time, but apparently it's a German creepypasta as well. I got a bunch of comments, like 12 different comments telling me that they'd seen it before on German forums back in the day. But the image of this white figure standing opposite, very far away, is so evocative and so powerful and so strong that to a bunch of people who'd never seen Doctor Who before, it really was eye-catching. And so they clicked on it, and I got a bunch of comments saying, I've never watched Doctor Who before, I've never watched it before, but this is really cool. And I think the main factors in the video success was A, when I uploaded it, B, the thumbnail. The thumbnail is very good. I
Yeah.
will admit the thumbnail for this is very eye-catching. And C, it was my decision at the very start of the video to open with one of the best clips in all of Doctor Who, which is when the Watcher shows up. That music cue is so good and powerful. And if you look at the most rewatched bits of the video, that clip is at the very start. And I don't know if you know this, it's a little thing about YouTube. If you have bits that people rewatch again and again, that adds to the watch time and boosts the video.
Yeah.
So having like a rewatch video, especially early on, really boosts the video. So it was a mixture of that. And also, it's just a really good topic. It's a bit of Doctor Who that is really good and really mysterious. And also the title, Doctor Who's Biggest Unsolved Mystery, which became a series title. And I always envisioned it as a series title, even though mystery is singular. And I remember before I came to Twitter, someone on my Discord server sent me a thread with 200 likes that was complaining about my clickbait. You know, I've got haters, generational haters, before I even came to Twitter. Right? Apparently that person got suspended. I don't know why. But so when I got on Twitter, I tried to look for the hate thread on me, and it was gone because the guy was suspended. But this video title, Doctor Who's Biggest Unsolved Mystery, it implies that if you haven't watched any of Doctor Who before, this is like the number one thing you got to know. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh yeah,
you
yeah.
don't need to know anything else. This is just the one mystery that's so big and unsolved, right? Like, no one knows what it is. It's kind of like, I've never watched the guy, but this guy called Wendigoon had a video about cheese that showed up in my recommended. It was the first video I've ever watched from him, and I was like, I just gotta watch his video. And I think that's kind of the same thing that happened here. Also, I think the profile picture really added to this kind of mysterious aspect of it. You know, it's a big unsolved mystery. It's kind of horror because I know audiences were getting recommended my video due to horror. And also I've got no profile picture, so there's a mystery there. It's all mysterious. It's kind of begging you to click on the video. And I also think views are kind of like a cumulative thing. Once you've reached the view threshold, it's just going to go up and up and up, right?
Yeah.
Because people click on a video because it's got a high amount of views. And I don't know if this video is worthy of 500,000 views, but I'll fucking take it. You know what I mean? My biggest hit by far. And I think it always will remain so. But still, you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely, and I think as well on YouTube, right? Like this is where, for me at least, like the commentary knowledge really comes into play. Is titles that is who, what, why, you know, how. Ones where it's like a question, right? Something that needs to be answered, right? Do incredible in the algorithm, do really well with the audience, right? Just even from a commentary perspective, do incredibly well, right? So like, what happens? Who said YouTuber, right?
What do you
And that
think
works
is?
really well.
You know what I
Well,
mean? Like, why is that?
I think it's a general curiosity, right? I think from a commentary standpoint, it's always like, I want to find out what happened to this YouTuber. I've seen this YouTuber about, I've maybe heard from this YouTuber, or I've never heard of this YouTuber before, but a YouTuber randomly disappearing is interesting. And I think it's the same with like a Doctor Who character or a Doctor Who topic is like, who is, right? Like the fact that there's this big question around it makes people interested and curious, right? To want to find out, even if you're not a Doctor Who fan, or if you are a Doctor Who fan, right? And you want to know the answer to it, or people's theories. Like my most popular videos are like how, what, why, or like whatever happened, right? And I think it's just a general curiosity, right? People want to know how this happened, what happened, why this happened. I think it just comes down from people's general curiosity, which just works incredibly well in the algorithm. And, you know, I'll take it because, you know, it makes for some of the more interesting videos, right? Where maybe you have to rely.
I think it's just that, well, not just, but I think it's that a lot of videos like that are usually very good. So it's kind of like by association, you get lumped in with quality content. I also feel maybe that will be lessened because you're a commentary channel, so you'll know about this, but there has been like this slop content controversy, which have a bunch of those question marks. So maybe that will lessen the actual quality content. Maybe we'll have to switch up because of that. You know what I mean?
Well, like, it's like I definitely think because of like commentary stuff, right? That's where it comes into play here, right? Is it very much leans on that video essay type thumbnail and title, right? Which is like, you know, what happened to this person, right? Red text in the thumbnail, right? This like big eye catching thing, right? Very much plays into that commentary video essay, right? Which is the bigger form of commentary currently, right? The most popular thing, the most widespread one, right? Where, you know, people are just interested in these big essay videos or just even these short form essay type content. And that's just like a big thing at the moment. And like that's why I did the content I did on the Doctor Who channel originally. Is because, you know, I saw what was doing really well in the commentary in these video essays, and these smaller video essays, and I just applied that, but did it with Doctor Who content instead of YouTubers.
I would just say, by the way, that your content is so good. Like that Peter Capaldi video, that's one of the best Doctor Who videos I've ever seen. I love that video. It was so high quality. That's why I left a comment as well. And obviously your other videos are as well. But that one was like, damn, that video is so good.
Yeah, that video and thank you, man. That video and like the story of like Doctor Who's like what was the title? The story of here we go. The story of Doctor Who's most iconic song about the Shepherd's Boy, right? Just two videos that I really wanted to make. And they just follow that commentary style that like I've become really used to.
And it's videos like Peter Capaldi, it's just so great to see finally those videos do well. I mean,
oh my god, yeah.
You probably don't remember this, but for the longest time until 2020, the highest viewed Heaven Sent review was a 4 out of 10 on YouTube. It was a video with 70,000 views, and it said Heaven Sent was a 4 out of 10, and that was the highest reviewed video. That was the highest viewed review of Heaven Sent until about like 2020, and it's like, damn, people just fucking hated this shit for no reason. So I think what I really liked about the video was it was super high quality, like it was so well edited and it was funny and it was sharp, and also it was really heartfelt, but also it was talking about something which I really felt like your video kind of I'm gonna give you the credit. I think you sparked it. I think that after that video, there was a huge kind of revolution of people saying Peter
Mhm.
Capaldi's the best Doctor. I did this poll, who's the best Doctor? I did it multiple times over the past year. So like before the 60th, way before the 60th, a week before the 60th, a month after the 60th, and then a month after season 1. Who is the best Doctor? And Peter
Yeah.
Capaldi just crept right up. He was like the lowest before, and then he became number 1. And I just think that's so awesome because I've always loved his era and I always thought it was super underrated and overhated.
Oh, definitely. And then that's why I made that video, right? It's because it like the comments on the video, right, is really telling from where like the perception switched, right? It's like when I originally made the video, it's like, oh yeah, this guy, we all fucking hated him, right? The guitar, awful, right? Stuff like this, right? People just didn't like him, and then the switch came in, like, oh, I never knew this guy was hated, right? I never knew Peter Capaldi was hated like this. And the switch for me like was great because I think Capaldi is one of the, if not the most underrated Doctor, especially in New Who at least, right? In classic Who, there's a lot of arguments to be made.
Yeah.
But people absolutely like ripped on Peter's performance and like Peter as the Doctor. And for me, like that was always like something very close to home. And then there was a guy that made like a nearly 4 hour video on like the Peter Capaldi thing, a few months after I did, called Cosmic Night, and he made like this
Really?
huge video called Peter Capaldi, Doctor Who's underrated peak, and I think it's one of
I
the
haven't
most
seen that video.
popular Doctor Who videos ever made. It's like got nearly 1 million views,
Let's fucking
um,
go.
and it's incredible. And there was definitely like a huge switch with Capaldi, like in the last year. So I appreciate the credit there, or at least a little bit of
Yeah.
the credit
I think
for it.
your video was the first one that kind of sparked that renaissance, as it were. I
And
saw.
I'm glad of that, man. I'm so glad people view Capaldi in a different light now. Because I never got this unfounded hate. Of course, there's always going to be criticism to someone's era. But
I'm
I,
not saying they're on like a handful of
yeah,
bad
yeah,
episodes, but like
but yeah,
overall,
it,
I
it
mean,
was insane.
yeah, I mean, people, especially when it comes to Hellbent, I thought people were going way overboard about an episode that really is not that bad. I mean, it's pretty good, guys. Like, let's be honest here. I don't know if you remember when that was the worst episode of Doctor Who ever, like Hellbent.
Yeah,
And it's like, come on, man, that is the
see,
worst one. Give me a
I,
break.
I
It's not even the worst of the
yeah,
season. It's not even like bottom 5 of that season.
yeah, I love Hellbent. I think Hellbent is such a great
Great
episode.
finale.
Yeah, great finale, really emotional, really impactful. A lot of the hate came from the fact that, for whatever reason, and I kind of get it, but I kind of don't. People just really, really hate Clara. So a lot of the
Yeah,
hate came
that
from that,
people forgotten about that now.
which might be my next video.
Ooh, let's
Yeah.
go.
But yeah, like completely underrated episode, and that's actually what I kind of want to ask you to like, slowly end off this episode. Is
Yep.
okay, right? Let's go with this. Maybe not Doctor, right? But episode, right? What's your most controversial Doctor Who opinion to like kick things off?
I like Jodie Whittaker. No, that is probably the most controversial
Yeah,
opinion.
yeah.
Saying I like Series 11, and I like Jodie Whittaker. Uh, I mean, if I want to get really into it, like
Mhm.
really controversial, yeah, I think that has to be it, right? Like, I think
Oh,
Series
definitely.
11 is a good series of Doctor Who, and I think it's enjoyable. Um,
Yeah,
I don't really have like another unpopular opinion would be that I think Series 12 is worse than Series 11, but like
yeah. Oh
probably
no,
like just as
100%. Yeah.
many people agree with that. I mean, just saying anything positive about the Jodie Whittaker era will be received with like waves and waves of hate. Um, so what's another controversial opinion? This is a controversial opinion. I think the Doctor's wife isn't that good. I've never really liked
Yeah.
that episode. Um, I mean, it's not a bad episode. There are really good parts of it, but it's not like people say that it's like the best episode of that series. I definitely disagree. Um, and I think the ending to the giggle is probably the worst ending to a Doctor Who episode ever. Not because of the bi-generation, but because of the 14th Doctor settling down. It's the worst ending ever. It goes against the whole character of the Doctor, the whole idea of Doctor Who. It's so depressing because they seem to be under the impression that it's like really happy, when in reality it's really sad to see my favorite hero getting old and do shit dinner parties and stuff like that, and it's just depressing to me.
Yeah.
I think it's
No.
awful.
Yeah.
But those are my
Uh,
unpopular opinions.
No, definitely, and I think there is such like with at least Jodie, right? Unfortunately, and it just comes from quality. And this isn't about Jodie's Doctor because I think Jodie's Doctor is heavily underrated. But just from like an episode basis, I think of course Jodie's, if you wanted to rank it, is probably in terms of quality not always the highest. But I think people rip on it way too much, give it too much of a hard time.
I
Even
mean, the
the
thing
Timeless
is that
Child.
it's so short, you know what I mean? Like, that's what I find so crazy about it, is that it's 3 series. And no, it's not even 3 series, it's 2.5 series, right? Like, if it was like a long period of time, maybe I get it, but it's such a short era.
Yeah,
And like, half of it is above average. Like, half of it is good. I would say about probably like 5 episodes, I would say are bad, like straight up bad, right?
yeah.
Legend of the Sea Devils, I'd say is terrible,
Oh my
right?
god, yeah, awful.
Like that, but the thing is that most of the era is like pretty good, and it's really is kind of inoffensive when it comes to a lot of this stuff. And there is, I'm gonna get a lot of hate for saying this, I don't think there's a lot to really talk about in the era. I mean, you've got the good episode and you've got the bad one. I mean, series 11 series I really like. It's got good episodes, it's got bad episodes, right? Series 12 I like it, but I'm not as keen on it. It's got good episodes, it's got bad episodes. Series 13, I really like that series for personal reasons, because COVID was a shit time. It was fun, right? But that series has got good episodes and bad episodes. Like,
Yeah,
what's the issue, really? I mean, if you go back to like series 10 has good episodes and bad episodes as well. I mean, I'm not really
yeah.
too keen on Lie of the Land, right? Series 9 that has good episodes and bad episodes. Series 8 that has good episodes and bad episodes. Series 7 that has good episodes and bad episodes. I mean, sure, you could argue about like, oh, the highs are so much higher here and the lows are so much lower here, but like, if you really get into the weeds of it, right, in 10 years when a bunch of extra series of Doctor Who has come out, right, and there's going to be people who binge watch from series 1 to series 20, right, do you think that the 2.5 series, right, of 11, 12 and 13, which realistically you can watch in about like a week, right, do you think that's going to be like, oh my god, it
Yeah.
ruined the show, it's so much worse than everything? It's like just different, and I really don't think it's that much. I mean, I did watch. I watched what was the episode I watched? So I watched The Ghost Monument and I watched The Witchfinders. That was it. I
Mhm.
watched them and I thought they were perfectly fine and good episodes of Doctor Who. And then I remembered that if I were to say that on my YouTube channel, I get crucified and people be like, "No!" And it's like, come on,
Yeah.
bro, just relax, right? It's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
These episodes are perfectly fine, right? I really don't see them as egregious as other people do. I
Oh,
mean,
definitely not.
the baseline of the Chibnall era is like all right, pretty good. The highs of the Chibnall era are like, whoa, this is really good, and then the lows of the Chibnall era is like, wow, this is dog shit, right? But overall, as a package, it's like 2.5 seasons of all right enough Doctor Who. I don't really see why people go as crazy about it as they do.
See,
And go on.
I think there's a few things, right? I think it's because the lows are very low. I think people have a focus on that and don't focus on the good, right? So I think people overly focus on the real lows of the the
Yeah,
Chippewa
but there
era,
aren't
which is
actually that
unfortunately,
many. I mean, like
yeah,
Orphan 55, Arachnids in the UK.
Praxius,
The thing about Praxis is I think it's too forgettable an episode for people to ever care about it.
yeah,
So I think Orphan 55, Arachnids in the UK, Legend of the Sea Devils. If you want to get really technical, you could throw in the finale of Flux there as well as a low point. Even though I
yeah.
think because it's COVID, you can kind of push that aside.
Uh,
Like, yeah, it's a bad episode, but you can kind of like understand. Okay, well they can't have more than
yeah,
3 people in a room at one time. You know what I mean?
definitely.
It's not a good episode. In fact, I would say it's like kind of an illegible episode, but like I'm more forgiving of it than I would be for like the pre-COVID episodes, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So I would say there are about 3 or 4 really bad episodes of the Jodie Whittaker era before COVID. If you include COVID, there's about 6. There's like 31 episodes of the whole show, right? Like that's 6 really bad episodes. I would say there are about 6 really good episodes as well, which means 12 minus 30, 31 minus 12. That's 19 okay episodes of the show. I mean, I don't really see like I understand like the bad points really stick out in people's minds, but like is it they're like they're not really that bad. You know what I mean? Like they're
No, I definitely get
so
that.
easily
Like,
just filler episodes of Doctor Who. I mean, I think of like the Capaldi era, the bad bits, they don't stick out to me. Like when I think of the Capaldi era, I don't think of Kill the Moon. I think of the first episode I think of is Heaven Sent, right?
Oh yeah,
When I
yeah,
think of
yeah.
the Jodie Whittaker era, the first episode I think of is either Power of the Doctor or Haunting of Villa Diodati, which are both great episodes.
Oh,
When I think
yeah,
of
yeah.
when
Great
I think of the
episodes.
11th Doctor's era, what's the first one that comes to mind for the 11th Doctor? It's probably like the God Complex. That's the first one that came to mind
God
for me. It's
Complex.
a
Yeah.
brilliant episode. When
The
I like,
50th. You know.
yeah, and like with the sixth and seventh Doctor, which I would say probably seasons 23 and 24 are the kind of like the low point of the show. Even though that is the case, when I think of the sixth Doctor, I think of Revelation of the Daleks, which is a great episode. When I think of the seventh
Yep.
Doctor, I think of Remembrance of the Daleks, which is a great episode. I mean, maybe this is just the way I think, which is different to other people, but like the low points aren't like really that egregious to me. Like Arachnids of the UK, that can very easily fall into the recesses of my mind. It's not the first episode I think of when I think of the 13th Doctor.
Well, like I think the issue with the 13th, like the 13th Doctor's era, right, is I think there are some incredible highs, right? So, Haunting of Villa Diodati, I think Flux has some great episodes. So, like, the Son Tyrants coming back, the Weeping Angels come back, right? Incredible, right? The designs,
Yeah,
incredible, right?
Flux is a lot of fun.
Yeah, a lot of fun. But I think what tarnished it forever, right? And I think people would have a more like popular, like nice consensus of the era, if Chibnall didn't introduce Timeless Child and then do nothing with it. I think that's
Kind of
what.
like they didn't do anything with it. I just don't like
See,
they introduced it. You know what I mean?
yeah, like
I have not. I was. I know a lot of people are like, oh, he should have done something with the idea. I remember thinking at the time, I know they're going to do nothing with the idea, and I hope they do nothing with the idea because the idea just is kind of boring.
The only reason I don't like that they did anything with the idea is because they destroyed, like they killed off the Time Lords again, and then to introduce that idea. I don't like that.
The thing is that I think the Time Lords. This is an unpopular opinion. I think the Time Lords kind of suck. I mean, they're just really boring. Like they're really good in the war games, and then they're so stupid.
Yeah.
And then in Hellbent, right? To bring in Hellbent, the problem with Hellbent is that all of the Time Lords are basically just regular humans, and it's like, okay, well, we waited so long to have Gallifrey back in Doctor Who, and it is basically just Earth for all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
Right. Which I'm fine with in the context of Hellbent, because Hellbent is a story that's not about Gallifrey. But I can't really be mad at Chibnall for getting rid of Gallifrey because there was no point for it being brought back in the first place. I think it's more emotive for it to be gone. The problem is with the Timeless Child is that it's just not a very good idea, right? Like, I don't think that you can really fix it in retrospect by doing stuff with it. I mean, here's a challenge for you. Think of a good story that can be done with that idea.
Yeah, you can't. I think the only.
Can you think of one? I can't.
No, I think the only good one at the time, right? I think would have been like trying to get the Master more involved, right? Which I know was a theory at the time,
thinking the Master's the Timeless Child, you can do stuff with that, but like,
and that would have been incredible.
I think I was talking with Tharis the other day, and he said this, like, is it possible to have a good story with pre-Hartnell Doctors? And as a joke in quotation marks, I did write a script. I wrote a full script. It's called Dance of the Doctors, which is an episode which is about that. And I liked it. I thought it was good. But when it was all done, and even while I was writing it, I think it's just not a very interesting idea. It's just not a very interesting idea. You can't really do much with it. And the reason I didn't really mind it is because in the episode itself, The Timeless Children, right, which is the bit that everyone misses, is that the characters do say to the Doctor, it doesn't matter, it doesn't change who you are, which is what I think, which is why I don't really mind it. I think the problem with The Timeless Child, more so that they didn't do anything with it, is the fact that it is there in the first place. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just unnecessary, and I think a lot of people took it as Chibnall wanted to make his stamp on the show, but then it kind of negated it when he didn't do anything with it. So it's like I don't think he was doing it.
I think the reason he did it is because in the 90s, everyone wanted to do that. So he's like, oh, everyone will love this because when I was a kid in Doctor Who, this was what everyone wanted, right?
And no one wanted it.
Realize that no one wants it. I don't think even he wanted it, being real. But if you do go back to the 90s, that was like the popular thing, is that everyone wanted to do it. And as someone who made a video on the Cartmore plan, it literally is the Timeless Child, but more overcomplicated. And I think the problem with the Timeless Child is that it's unintuitive and overcomplicated. And the simple backstory, the Doctor is a Time Lord, is more interesting and better than the backstory, well, actually, the Doctor was a blah, 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 from blah, 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 blah. And it's like, who cares? Sometimes simple is bad, right?
Definitely.
And I think the problem with the Children era, yeah, I will concede the Timeless Child. I actually think the episode itself, the Timeless Children, is rather enjoyable. Like it's got a lot of really fun parts, but the arc itself is so boring that I don't necessarily blame people. But at the same time, when the Timeless Child inevitably gets retconned, which you could argue it already has happened, I mean, I don't really see why you can hold that against the show anymore. Like, I would hold it against the Chibnall era if he had done something with it. Because he hadn't, then you can't really say it.
Well, yeah.
Because, like, imagine in 5 years' time, they say the Timeless Child was a lie. Well, you'll go to the Chibnall era and you say, well, the problem is they introduced a Timeless Child, but they didn't do anything with it, which means that they didn't really impact the story of the show. Because the Timeless Child, all it really does is harken back to a mysterious past that we never saw happen and doesn't affect the actual show, right? The Timeless Child doesn't affect the show at all, actually, like the events of the show. It affects events before the show. If it gets retconned in the future, that means the Timeless Child never affected the show. Really be angry at the Chibnall era for introducing something that never affected the show. You know what I mean?
See, yeah, and for me, like, it's like, at least from my perspective of the Thomas Jordan, right, and like that whole arc, right, including like the whole series, right, as a whole, is that I just don't like it from the perspective of it kind of, you know, at least with the Gallifrey aspects, right, and I made a video on this recently for like why I think the Thomas Child arc is overhated. But my reasons for like disliking it come from a sense of, okay, so you've restored Gallifrey and all that thing back to the status quo, right, where we've started, right? But like, you know, we've had all this arc where the Doctor's been super sad and super depressed about it, right? And not that it negates it fully, right? But I think, you know, having that big powerful moment in the 50th, right, where, you know, Tom Baker is the curator, like, you know, kind of like lets like Matt Smith's 11th Doctor know that, you know, save Gallifrey, and then you watch it back to back, right? And that's, you know, for me at least,
you want me to go in my full lore rant about all of the Doctor Who lore surrounding Gallifrey. So with Series 12, right, what I hate about it, as someone who does like the series, but the reason I dislike it compared to Series 11 is because it goes against Series 11 and it tries to be a Rusty Davies series. So the first thing it does is get rid of Gallifrey because that's what Rusty Davies did, right? And then it obviously, you know, superficial comparisons, Captain Jack, action focus, all of that stuff, blah, 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 blah. But the point is, with the lore, they did that, which goes against the whole point of Jodie Whittaker's original Doctor, which she was meant to be the first Doctor to get over the Time War. That was the whole point, right? The whole point was Jodie Whittaker was going to be a fresh, new, happy Doctor without the baggage anymore. And I was like, finally, we've had however many years, we've had about 13 years of Time War baggage, finally something new, we can get over the angst, and then they're like, and we're going to just reinsert it really clunkily back in, and it's like, okay, well, that goes against the whole point. But then, exactly. I think, going back even further, was Peter Capaldi being the first regeneration of a new incarnation. That pissed me off too, because Jodie Whittaker should be the first incarnation of a new regeneration cycle. Because she's the first female Doctor, so it would make sense that for this regeneration cycle he couldn't be a woman, and then for this next regeneration cycle he can be a man or a woman. That makes perfect sense to me, right? But also, because she's the first Doctor to have gotten over this, it would make perfect sense for that to be the first of a new cycle. But above all, the only reason why Peter Capaldi is the first of a new regeneration cycle is because in Time of the Doctor, they pulled that the Meta-Crisis Doctor actually counted as regeneration, even though it wasn't meant to, just to make Peter Capaldi, who works perfectly as the final incarnation of the Doctor, right? You know what I mean? Like, as the 13th life, the 14th life, for no reason, even though he's the 12th Doctor. What were they thinking? It's like a series of dumb decisions where there was a break of the dumb decisions in Series 11 where they're like, okay, we're going to do something new, we're finally going to reset all this stuff, and then in Series 12 they immediately completely course correct and go right back to dumb decisions. That's what pisses me off about it, right? Because Peter Capaldi being the 13th like incarnation of the Doctor, the final character, makes why in the Doctor Falls he doesn't want to regenerate even more powerful. Am I wrong in saying that because he's the first Doctor, it doesn't make any sense why in the first of a new regeneration cycle he wouldn't want to regenerate. But it does make perfect sense that he doesn't want to regenerate if he's the last in a regeneration cycle. You see what I mean?
No,
But it's
definitely.
like a bunch of these law changes that they did all for no reason. The only reason why in Time of the Doctor, Matt Smith is the 13th Doctor is so for 5 seconds, 4-year-olds who don't realize that it's going to be undone can think that this is the end of Doctor Who. Like, it's just so mind-boggling to me why they did that. Because that one decision in Time of the Doctor kind of just made nothing make sense for like 11 years now, right? That's my law rant out of the way. So I think it's the reason Gallifrey being redestroyed is dumb is because of a compounding effect of really dumb decisions being made with the law. That's what I think.
Well, I also hate how it takes it back kind of to the beginning, right? We're back at the stage where the Doctor's kind of sad that his people are gone, and it's
That
like
shit is so
I'm
dumb.
over
That
it.
pisses me off. I'm not
I'm
gonna lie.
over
I'm
it.
so bored of it, especially after the giggle where they're like, "I'm over my trauma now," and then they immediately go back to, "Oh my god, I'm the last of my kind." Bro,
See,
get over it. You're
I
probably not
yeah,
even the last of your kind, right? And
yeah.
see, like that. So in the 2005 revival, the idea was that the Doctor knew he wasn't the last of his kind because he could telepathically feel, right, if there were other Time Lords. But that's been retconned now, so he can't telepathically feel. So how does he know that he's the last one? He doesn't. So what's the point of having this angst?
It annoys me because I feel like all the character progression before is just like, okay, well, it happened, but like now we're back. So it's like it really annoys me from that standpoint because it's now like, okay, I love when the Doctor gets angry and dark, and it's some of the best moments of the show, and I really wish that they did more with it, where they focused more on it, and like, you know, maybe had like a series, like a full series arc where the Doctor's a lot more darker than he ever is in the show. But that's just my thing. But we're back at a stage where we're just retreading the same things, but instead of the Time War being the cause, it's the Master, and it's just like, well, we've done this, but it's now just the Master's fault. But it's like the only good thing that could come from that is a really good confrontation with like either Shooter's Doctor or like another Doctor with the Master, and that is the only good thing that could come from it. It's a really good story there.
I don't think it's gonna happen, boss.
No,
I'm
I
not
don't
gonna
either.
lie. They didn't they say that they've got no plans to do anything with the Master,
What? But then
right?
that's like
I'm pretty sure
conflicting
they
to
said
then
that.
what is conflicting to then that weird little, I don't know, like mid
Tooth
credit scene
thing.
where like the
Yeah.
tooth thing. So it's like I
But
don't.
Ross Davies did that because in series 3 he did the same thing, which again
It's
is,
annoying.
well, we did it. We're doing it because we did it before, and it's like, well, we don't want to do the same things as before. We want something new. You know
And
what
why
I mean?
was
I
Sim
think
laughing? Like I don't. It's annoying.
yeah, it was really confusing, and I think this is kind of the reason why I tapped out of Doctor Who lore a long time ago, is because in 2013 I think is when it just stopped mattering. I think when I know, you know, we were just talking about how great the Peter Capaldi era is, but when Peter Capaldi talks about him being the last of the Time, you're not the last of the Time Lords. You know you're not the last of the Time Lords. Stop saying this, okay? It's had its time. It's been 10 years, right, of the same thing. It isn't as powerful anymore. And then they just longed it out. And then with Jodie Whittaker, we had 1 year where it's like, and you know what, the Doctor's happy. And then immediately we just long it out again. And now we're longing it out again. And it's like, how can I be invested in this lore? There's just no reason for me to. So I suppose that to tie it back into your original question, my whole unpopular opinion is that Time of the Doctor kind of ruined Doctor Who lore for the past 11 years for me.
No,
And of
no,
course,
no.
all of
I
the
get
other
that.
decisions made after as well.
Yeah. And a lot of my like issues with the show as a whole is they will introduce something and complete an arc, and then it just never goes anywhere. So like even if it isn't like, you know, what is it, Sacha Dhawan's Master isn't a continuation of Michelle Gomez's Master in like the timeline, right? Kind of annoys me that, you know, Missy had that redemption, was going to go back for the Doctor, and next time we see the Master or Evil again. It kind of annoys me. Kind of annoys me that nothing happened there, even if it wasn't like.
I think it's so selfish,
you know,
to think
it's
of
annoying.
Moffat to think that he was going to redeem the Doctor's Moriarty, right?
Yeah.
Like, it. How do I say this, right? I think it was really great in the context of Series 10, but like in the context of the show,
It doesn't make any sense.
how am I meant to be convinced that the Master's turned good? Especially Missy, who like in Series 8 was effectively the devil, right? She made hell, like literal hell, for every human ever. And so that means that she's technically got the blood of billions on her hands, and she intentionally liked torturing them, like men, women, and children, and then we're expected to believe that she turns good.
And
Like, it doesn't really make
yeah,
much sense. But the thing is that again, it's that kind of like lack of commitment to it. But I can't blame Chris Chibnall for not committing to that, because obviously, right, if, right, say I was the showrunner and I came in and then the final episode of the last era turned the master good, I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna be undoing that. I'm not gonna lie,
definitely.
I would, right?
But see, where I would go with it though is I would make the master find out that the doctor, if we're doing the timeless child, right, is the master finds out the doctor is the timeless child, right, still being good, and then turns back, right, because so much anger and whatever.
I promise you, I wrote a script for this. I literally wrote a script.
Yeah.
It was a 90-minute drama. It's called Crochet, and it was bridging the gap between Spyfall and the Doctor Fools. And of course, as any Doctor Who fanboy nerd, I made the slight change that the Master is the timeless child and he lies to the Doctor about it. Right? But outside of that, I literally made that because I think there's a really good story to be told there. But instead,
and
I have to put blame on all three showrunners now, even though I love them. I do love Stephen Moffat, Rusty Davies, and Chris Chibnall. All three of them have let the side down, every single one of them, when it has come to this particular emotional conceit, I think.
Yeah. And it kind of like, for me at least, if that was done right, if it was done right, whether the master find out that either he was the timeless child or the doctor was the timeless child or whatever, right,
and at least we got that moment to see the fact that the master, who, imagine this, right, the Such Dwfan master really does try to be good, right? Like, you could have that be like, he's naturally evil, but he tries to be good and he tries really hard. And then he has that breaking point where he goes back into old ways. That's a really interesting story to be told there, but it's told off screen. And I don't want it to be done in Big Finish. I want it to be done on the show. Okay, please. You can't have these massive disjointed time jumps. I feel like the Spyfall thing is fine because it works in that reveal. Realistically, before the Timeless Children, we should have had a prequel. That's what should have happened, right? Like, I'm fine with Spyfall being the moment where we find out the reveal, because that reveal is so awesome. But we need to have that shown on screen, that transitionary period, even if it's only like a 3-minute flashback. It would be really disappointing if it was only a 3-minute flashback, but like, at least, you know what I mean? And
definitely,
I think that's kind of my problem with a lot of the lore stuff. As well, with Russell T Davies, you couldn't have shown the master being put in a tooth. Either you couldn't have shown that, or you just shouldn't have mentioned it. And like Stephen Moffat doing a bunch of stuff with Gallifrey and the Peter Capaldi era that went nowhere, but I didn't really mind that it went nowhere because I didn't really care anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Just before we completely lose the plot, what was the final question that you wanted to ask?
Oh, well, yeah, but before we get there real quick, make a final closing statement on that. It's exactly why I love RTD's Dalek era, right? His Dalek story, and Stephen Moffat's poetic end to that with Victory of the Daleks, right? It's because you know everything that happened, right? You can follow it easily, step by step, and everything, even though like some points, kind of whatever, it makes sense and you can follow it. And I love that story. I love that story arc. Across several Doctors, across whatever, it makes sense. Really easily to follow. Stephen Moffat kind of like, it kind of goes on its own thing because the Daleks come back into power or whatever. But it's so easy to follow. You know what's happening. We see everything, right? Apart from like, Dalek can't go back into the Time War, but it's explained in a really good way. Everything makes sense. Everything connects. You don't need to see it.
It was like a mythical part of history.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
And it makes sense. Where I feel like we're having all these big story beats, like the Master, finding out that the Doctor's the timeless child, and all these other things that don't kind of work off screen, right? Being told off screen, so for a casual fan especially, watching it just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. And I wish we had more of that interconnecting.
With Doctor Who lore in general, is that it just doesn't make any sense. And I'm the person who thinks that the best way to make it make sense is to stop overcomplicating it and make it just a bit more simple. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and
I don't think there's
about the
anything wrong with making stuff simple. Sometimes simple is the best.
And that was what was great with like the Dalek story, right? With the Emperor, Cult of Skaro, like Dalek Khan, right? It was very easy to follow, very simple, right? Of course, you had a few complicated bits in there, but nothing that was like incredibly complicated to understand, right? And that's why I love that story. That's why I love like how interconnected it is, right? Instead of what we get now. But yeah, just moving on to the last question. But before we wrap up, I want to ask you, right? Coming back to Doctors now, really getting in it. First, I want to ask you, right, just to end it all off, what's your favourite Doctor? so we'll get like a
My
consensus.
favorite Doctor. It's tied between Tom Baker and John Pertwee. I'll
Oh,
say John
classic.
Pertwee.
Yeah, good. That's a good choice. Love Pertwee, love Baker, love Capaldi, and of course then Tennant, right? Like I
Yeah.
can't not mention Tennant. But Capaldi, Baker, and Pertwee, they're great. Sylvester McCoy, underrated, unfortunately. But yeah, no, definitely. And who's your least favorite Doctor?
My least favorite Doctor is the 14th Doctor. Nah, I can't say that because that's a cop out. Probably by default the 13th Doctor. I mean, I really like Jodie Whittaker, and I think
Yeah.
she's great, but she has the least amount of episodes, and I just by default
It just doesn't compare.
You're at the bottom. I mean, to say it doesn't compare, a lot of the times it does compare. When I watch a Jodie Whittaker episode, I love her. I love her to bits, but it's just, you know what I mean. Like, someone's got to be at the bottom, and it just so happens that Jodie Whittaker's at the bottom. I'm not a Jodie Whittaker hater. If you listen to me for like more than 3 seconds, you'll quickly realize that I really like her era. But just for me personally, that's the one who's gonna have to go on the bottom. And but it does change occasionally. I remember once it was the 7th Doctor just by default. Now it's the 13th Doctor. Maybe it will change. It's really difficult for me to put labels on these things because I'm always
definitely
watching new stuff, changing all the time. But just for now, that will be my answer.
Yeah, no. I agree. I mean, you know, you can have the cop outs of you know, the fugitive Doctor, the war Doctor, or whatever, right? As like the little cop out answers. For me as well, it would be you know, the same Doctor. I don't hate the same Doctor, right? I feel like in comparison to a lot of people, I give that era a lot of charity, a lot of love, especially on reflection of it. I think for me, where it doesn't compare, is where you know, I feel like there isn't a lot of character development in the sense I feel like we just tread the same water and go backwards rather than go forwards. And that's where, for me, unfortunately, she kind of ends up at the bottom. And that's not Jodie Whittaker's fault because Jodie Whittaker's like a really, really great actress
To be
and
fair,
a really
though,
good actress in that.
that kind of happens with the 6th and 7th Doctors too.
But that's why they're towards the bottom as well for me. So like,
That's fair enough.
I gotta keep my consistency there. That's why they all like kind of end up like right at the bottom because they kind of tread the same water. They don't move forward, and when they do move forward, then they move backwards. And that really annoys me because I think when Doctor Who does character progression, it does it really good. And I think if like Jodie's Doctor got a lot more character progression that stuck, and didn't walk it back or didn't have more Time Lord like death angst, I think it would have been good. But unfortunately, it kind of just lowers it. And then especially when you're bringing in doctors like Tom Baker and all these other doctors, you know, unfortunately, Jodie can never be towards the top, unless she might get redemption right from expanded media or whatever. But so far,
count on that.
you know,
The expanded media is usually as good as the show itself is.
which is
I mean,
unfortunate.
people like to say, "Oh, the 6th Doctor got saved by expanded media." The 6th Doctor's audios are about as good as the 6th Doctor's stories, with a few exceptions. Some of the audios are really good, but the same with the 7th Doctor, same with the 5th Doctor. The 4th Doctor's audios are worse than the 4th Doctor's stories. I mean, the 13th Doctor has good stories. I wouldn't expect the audio dramas to be completely, absolutely amazing. They're going to stay in line with what the show was.
I guess the only Doctor where, you know, can truly be like saved or expanded on properly, expanded media, and has been, is Paul McGann's 8th Doctor, right?
That's true.
Like, because, you know, we didn't really see, like, you know, apart from the TV movie and then Night of the Doctor, right, there was not much there. So like, of course, like, you know, you can't really make it worse because there wasn't anything to make worse. And you know, his run of Big Finish is arguably probably the best.
It is. I agree.
Like, arguably, because there's just so you can do anything, right? Because there isn't a thing you have to kind of contain apart from we know it ends with the Time War, and it begins in the TV movie, and then everything else is like, you know, to play with. And I guess with Jodie Whittaker, it's all kind of there, right? It's all very contained within, you know, Chibnall's stories that, you know, we start with Yaz and we end with Yaz, and there isn't much leeway to go with, which is unfortunate because I think if there was a lot more leeway there, you know, maybe a bit like the 8th Doctor, or some doctors that, you know, kind of have this break in between, I think, you know, potentially there could be some like really good character development, really good stories there to a certain extent, of course, right? Because you can't go too far. That would kind of bump her up for me. But unfortunately, like you said, someone has to be at the bottom.
I think she's still really good.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna kind of go with it. I mean, I really like all three of her series. Series 12 is my least favorite by a bit,
mhm.
but
Oh,
series
definitely, yeah.
11 and series 13 is what I think are really enjoyable, and I can have a really good time with watching. Even episodes in series 12 like Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror, Spyfall Part 1, Haunting of Villa Diodati, Essentially the Cybermen. A bunch of these episodes, even Can You Hear Me, actually to some extent, right? I can just sit down, watch them, and have a great time, right? But I feel like when you've got Peter Capaldi, world class actor, right? Tom Baker and John Pertwee, who are the Doctor, Patrick Tran and William Hartnell, who are like gods, right, in the fandom. Christopher Eccleston, another world-class actor. David Tennant has a very, very, very solidly consistent run, as does Matt Smith, right? Jodie Whittaker has the least amount of content, right, and also has what is it? I don't want to say her highs aren't as high because I think Power of the Doctor is really, really, really fun and good. But you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
someone has to be at the bottom by default. I think she's still really, really good. The bottom is very, very high. If it was on a tier list, she would be like A, B tier, which is still really high, but someone's got to be there at the bottom. You know what I mean? And the
I think,
Seventh Doctor is right next to her for the exact same reasons, right?
yeah.
Short seasons, not really much going on, some low points, and that's what I put there.
See, and I think it comes from with Jodie Whittaker as well, is that she's an incredible actress, and when she's given the material to work with, she's great, right, really great. But again, with Doctor Who fandom, and just with any fandom, when an actor or an actress or whoever, right, isn't given the material to work with properly, right, that's always going to be like front and center. People are going to critique, show it, right. It's going to get more views on YouTube, right, because it's negative and all that type of stuff.
That's true. If it's more negative, it does get more views.
Exactly, yeah. So like, I guess with Jodie, it's not that she's a bad actress. I think she's incredible, like Broadchurch, like again, alongside David Tennant and by Chris Chibnall.
To be fair,
But
I don't really mind if people think she's a bad actress because I just disagree. But it's like I'm not going to say you're objectively wrong because people have opinions, right? I mean, to an extent, right? Like if someone said David Tennant was a bad actor, I would vehemently disagree. But I wouldn't say they're like, "Oh my god, you're totally wrong," right?
yeah,
because the thing is that it just is kind of opinions at the end of the day, and I don't think people are wrong for disliking the Chibnall era for any reason that they have. I mean, I know this is another unpopular opinion, but I know you're not really allowed to say I don't like that the Doctor was a woman. But at the same time, the character of the Doctor was a guy for over 50 years. There's bound to be at least a couple people in the audience who just don't vibe with it because it's a woman, and I don't necessarily think you're like wrong. That's just your subjective opinion, right? And I think, again, with Jodie Whittaker, right, if you do think she's a bad actor or bad actress, then that's fair enough to you. But I've got my opinion, and I hold my opinion to myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think as well we kind of forget that, like, you made a great point there, right, about like definitely some people in the fandom and people watching at home, right, might have their own views on like a woman Doctor after so long of it being a man, right? That comes into play as well. Why Jodie Whittaker just didn't get given a chance as well, which again I think that's why she has the negative perception she does, is because she wasn't given a chance, like half and half for for certain reasons, which is incredibly unfortunate. From the start,
no, it kind of just is what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, she's really the odd one out, and she had not just the odd one out in terms of her being a woman, but she's an odd one out in that she's the only Doctor with a certain showrunner and a certain director and a certain composer, Sagan Akinola, and literally every other modern Doctor Who showrunner has the same team, the same writers, and the same composer, right? Like everything about her era is different, right?
Exactly.
Like in terms of visual style, tone, musical style, and format, right? And like the structure of episodes is different, right? So it's very easy to just point and say, well, she's the odd one out. And also on top of that, she's a woman, obviously, right? So there's like a bunch of compounding factors. And as someone who is a staunch defender of the Jodie Whittaker era, I have never for 1 second said that people are objectively wrong if they dislike it. So that's just my final statement on that question. Who is your least favorite Doctor? I kind of went on waffling about that, but you know what I mean.
That's fine, man. Yeah, no, I get it, man. And just like my final thing there is, you mentioned composers, right? and for me, I think that's what as well, right, makes it so disconnected, right? Is that you can have all these different things, right? But of course, I think the consistency in the music was always something that, like, bridged the gap. It always had that, like, familiar sense, and I think when Second Akinola really, like, has his highs, he has his incredible highs, right? But a lot of people, the common critique, right, is that it isn't as memorable as some other songs. I would disagree slightly, and kind of agree, like, to a certain extent, but it kind of just, like, singles it out even more, the fact it has a different composer, where if it had the same composer, it would kind of feel like, the gap's been bridged a little bit more. It feels a little bit of the same. And that's no fault of his, of course.
Plays
but,
such a massive role. No, I'm
Yeah.
for real. If Murray Gold did the Jodie Whittaker era, I think most people would like it, and I'm being so for real.
Oh, definitely. And I think certain moments would, it would resonate with fans more. Think like, certain, like, imagine the Thomas Child, right? The massive reveal with, like, some of Murray Gold's, like, big hits, right? It would hit a lot more for, like, fans and stuff, right? And that's just a fact, right? Like, it would genuinely, make people think more of, like, older Who, like, almost a bit like a nostalgia thing, right?
Such a big jump. It's like such a big gap. You know what I mean? Like, it does feel like
definitely
a totally different show. And if something is a totally different show, then you don't give it as much charity because it hasn't earned it, because it's totally different, right?
Yeah.
So
and it kind of does work as its, like, own singular show, realistically. Like,
I think it does.
Like, it doesn't
so short,
have,
right?
Yeah, it's so short, and it doesn't have, like, a lot of connections, right? Like, apart from Power of the Doctor, right? Towards the end, right? Well,
which is
we see a lot of connections, right?
Special, right?
Yeah, exactly, right. There isn't much connecting it to the rest of the show, right? Which I think is quite a positive thing, right? I don't think you always need, like, a bunch of shit in your face, right? But of course, like, it just makes it ever again, right, disconnected. I think, unfortunately, right, as positive as that is, and as much as I love it not always having to connect to everything else, it probably didn't work in his favor because everything else wasn't connected.
It's that thing where fans say, "Oh, we don't want to have returning monsters. We don't want to have returning monsters," and then you don't have returning monsters, and they're like, "Wait, where are the returning monsters?"
Yeah.
Right? Fans will often say stuff they don't mean, and the truth of the matter is that no matter how much they say they don't like hype, Series 11 would be 10 times more popular if every episode was hype as hell. Right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's just kind of the way it is. I mean, the thing is, I completely agree with everything you're saying about it, but I will also like to add, for me personally, I like the fact that it's completely separate, because the way I watch Doctor Who is I go around all different ones, and when I watch a Jodie Whittaker episode, because it's so different, I don't get that burnout that I do when I watch, like, a bunch of say Matt Smith episodes in a row. Eventually I'm like, okay, I'm bored of this, I don't want to watch this no more. Right?
See, I guess it just didn't help with, like, the general audience and general public consensus, right? 100%. Is that, like, you've got so much different things, right? Different writer, different vibe of the show, even just the camera work, how that is, right? Completely different. How it's shot, how it looks, completely different. Breaking new ground with the Doctor and stuff. Like, different composer, and then there is no connection to everything else, or very little connection at least. I guess it kind of just doesn't work in the series' favor. But then, if you're a fan of the show and then you're going back and, like, rewatching it, like you said, it works in its favor, but it just didn't work on transmission, which is unfortunate. But again, what can you do about it? I mean, it's happened now.
It's happened.
It is what it is. I think my only ever gripe with anything, like, the only thing I ever care about, is how toxic some people are about it on both sides. And that will be my only ever gripe. Yeah. I hate, like, how toxic people are against it, and I hate the really, really toxic stands. Because it kind of kills the vibe for everyone on both sides. And it's like, it's unneeded, unnecessary, and that's where a lot of the, like, drama.
And it's like, oh my god.
Yeah. And that's where, like, a lot of the ridiculous takes come from.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, is it ever that serious?
And that's where, just, like, for the end, tying it back to what we said towards the beginning, right? That's where it comes back to, like, ludicrous ideas and ludicrous things and ludicrous nitpicks and stuff, is because people are, like, having, like, this turf war over their series and their, like, favorite thing.
But in Russell T Davies do this tiny thing. Well, in the Chibnall era, this tiny thing. But in Russell Davies do this tiny thing. Oh my god, shut up.
And it's just like, it doesn't matter, right? If you have your opinions, you have your opinions, but it's just not that serious as a show. Which is unfortunate, because it's kind of created this whole toxic vibe. Which, hopefully that will get better. But I mean, I think there's always going to be a bit of toxicity because of how a lot of people reacted to that era. So unfortunately, again, it's kind of a case of it is what it is. It's unfortunate, very unfortunate. Kind of got to deal with it. But man, I do really appreciate you coming on the podcast. I said to you before,
thank you so much for having me, my friend.
no worries, man. And I said to you towards the beginning that probably be about 50 minutes. It's been 2 hours.
No way. Anyway, this is good. I think it's good content. That's content. You know what I'm saying?
Definitely, man. It's always good for the podcast to speak to different content creators, different people from different niches and stuff, especially Doctor Who, right? A lot of the time, I'm speaking to commentary creators and other essay contentists, and of course you make essay content in terms of Doctor Who, but of course it's a completely different genre and niche than everyone else, and it's always nice to geek out a little bit on the podcast.
Oh yeah.
So I do appreciate you coming on for 2 hours, man. And everybody watching, this was a Trash Talk. If you did enjoy, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. But I've been your host, Samuel, and I will catch you in the next episode of the Trash Talkers podcast.